Okay, so it is 5 o'clock and we are ready to begin tonight's Conservation Commission meeting. There are a lot of people on this Zoom call, so please make sure that you mute your mic when you're not speaking. And I will begin by reading our remote script. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Erisman, Chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. I don't know that we have Mark Beal back, so we're waiting on him. Ian.
Ashley?
Yes.
Ian is having trouble connecting to audio, so he's going to call in the audio. So his video is working, but his microphone apparently is not. So he is working on calling in right now.
Okay, perfect. Erisman is here. Seth Engelberg.
Here.
Dave LaFleur.
Present.
Maureen Phillips.
Here.
Joe Topham.
Present.
Okay, and then hopefully we will have Mark and Ian shortly. Staff, when I call your names, please respond in the affirmative. Jeff Carlson.
Here.
Joanne Dodd.
Yeah.
And then anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative when I call your name. We have Stephen Cohen.
Here. Thank you.
You're here. David Haynes. Acting. Guthrie Diamond.
Okay, is that any better? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Ian.
Yes, Ian, we can hear you.
Good.
We can
Thank
hear you,
you.
but we
Sorry
can't
about
see you
this.
now.
No, well, you're not missing much, but unfortunately, of course, this always is the way, isn't it? That something goes wrong just as you're going to start a meeting.
Yes, well, we'll hopefully get through the technological hiccups.
Well, it's my end. It's not your end. So my ancient laptop is starting to show as much age as I am.
A fine craftsman never blames his tools, Ian.
Yep.
I'll bear that in mind, Joseph.
So I'm going to try and get a couple more people who are speakers on the agenda. Brian Madden.
Here.
Yeah.
Don Bracken.
Here.
Dan Wells.
Here.
And I think that's about all, and we'll call you guys as you come up for your agenda item. Hi, Mark. Are you back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows the public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Nantucket Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. Staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. The chair and/or staff will do their best to address the questions and comments. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So again, because there are so many individuals on this Zoom call, please remember to mute your mic if you're not speaking. It'll make it easier for everybody. And with that, we will open up the public meeting for public comment.
We haven't received any to this point, Madam Chair, so I think you could move forward.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. So with that, I will list the items that are continued this evening. Under notices of intent, we have Eli Zabar at 47 Squam Road, continued until September 3rd. Nantucket Point of View LLC at 9 Lincoln Avenue is continued until September 17th. Benton and Kelly Hayworth at 8 Pond Road is continued until September 3rd. Nantucket Island Land Bank at 35 Almanac Pond Road is continued until September 3rd. Tina Eager McGoldrick Trust at 33 Pignet Road continued until September 3rd. The Town of Nantucket at 37 Washington Street is continued until September 17th. And then under request for determination, the Monomoy Road Real Estate Trust at 26 Monomoy Road is continued until September 3rd. Under certificates of compliance, we have Trevor RP and Margaret Ann B. Price at 10 Long Pond Drive. That is continued until October 15th. And then we have Nancy Colson Seaman at 9 Hollowell Lane, continued until October 15th. So with that, we will begin our public hearing under notices of intent. We have 62 Cliff Road Realty Trust at 62 Cliff Road, and we just need to vote on a withdrawal. So is there a motion to accept the withdrawal?
Motion to accept the withdrawal.
All right, I'll give it to you, Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Dave, and by roll vote, Beal, oh, you need to unmute, Mark.
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye. Golding, Ian, you're muted. Can you hear to vote on the withdrawal?
It appears that Ian's on his cell phone and his computer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. So is that a yes to accept the withdrawal?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's an aye.
Okay,
Aye.
thank you. LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that, oh, Mark, yes.
Ian, it appears your iPhone is also on.
We're hearing his audio through the iPhone. He has no audio through the visual. So,
Okay.
but it didn't seem to lag too much, so that was good. So now we'll begin with Kim Glowacki at 46 Easton Street, and this is represented by Dan Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With me are Dan Wells and Don Bracken, and I'll turn to each of them in a little bit. We've submitted a revised site plan as well as a large package of documents, most of which I'm not going to go into today because we would be here for hours, and I don't think you'd let me. But just briefly, the last time we were here, it was made clear that the commission wanted to see some revisions that would push the proposed structures further away from resource areas, which we have done, and I'll get into that in a minute. The other thing the commission had some questions about was the existing bulkhead, and in particular, whether the western section of that bulkhead, which was buried by the accreted sand, was still there and what sort of condition it was in. And Don can speak to that in a few minutes. Actually want to break down a presentation into, because there is a fair amount here, into about 4 steps. And I'm going to start with an overview of the new site plan. Then I'm going to do a little bit of history. I submitted a lot of information on historical photos that show the condition, before sand started accreting at this location. And I'll leave most of those to the commission to consider in their packets, but I'm just going to try and hit the highlights of those materials. Then we're going to talk about the bulkhead, and we'll probably talk about it in 2 pieces. First of all, the exposed section, which is on the eastern part of the property, and the buried section, which is on the western part. Our prior site plan showed that, kind of delineation, but now, because we dug it up and now know where it is, we're showing it on the west side. With respect to the project itself, a couple of things. There are 2 proposed dwellings. They are now entirely out of the 25. The commission will remember at the last hearing, there were decks that were still within the 25. They are within the 50, but the amount of square footage that is within the 50 has been reduced from 1,500, and I think it's 13 square feet, to 1,263 square feet. So that's a reduction within the 50 of close to 20%. So they're now substantially more set back, and you'll be able to see this more when we do the air photos, but they're substantially more set back than other structures along Easton Street. One other thing to note is in the prior plan, the existing dwelling was, a portion of the existing dwelling was proposed to be preserved on the eastern lot. And now, after a lot of conversations, my clients have decided that it works better to preserve that existing dwelling on the western section of the lot. You can see that it says on the plan, portion of existing relocated dwelling. As before, the structures will be on helical piles. The first floor elevation is going to be increased by over 5 feet. And the bottom will have breakaway panels, in the event of flooding, that would allow the water to just flow through. The other thing I wanted to just touch on, the benefits of the revised site plan, of course, is the reduction in the amount of structure within 50. if you look at the easterly parcel, it's a little hard to see, and I don't have the control, Joe does, but that, so go down a little bit. The area just below that, it says fill in behind new bulkhead with compatible sand dune. So yeah, right there, what we're proposing is basically to expand the existing dune area so that the dune extends across the entire width of the property, and we get the benefit of flood protection from the dune for the entire property. The reconstruction of the bulkhead, which I will get into in a minute, provides additional storm damage prevention. As we talked about the last time, on the western side of the site, we are proposing along the property line to remove some existing Japanese knotweed. And I've already mentioned that rebuild will be on helical piles. I'm going to talk a little bit about the bulkhead. Don will he will get into more detail on that. But what we're proposing, as I mentioned, and I think Jeff was out there and saw it, and I don't know, maybe some of the other members of the commission saw it. I have not. But the buried section of the bulkhead was dug out, and it's visible and actually in fairly decent condition. But we're still proposing a new bulkhead, and there's a sketch of that in the materials. We'll get to, again, leave it where it is for now, Joe. We'll get to that when Don speaks. That bulkhead will extend from property line to property line, and the height would match the bulkheads on either side, so on the east and on the west. And while I'm speaking about that, I want to mention that at prior hearings, the Frisbees, who own 42 Easton Street, which is the property to the east, were represented by counsel. Arthur Reed was at the last meeting, and they objected to the proposal. The Frisbees are now supportive, and I have an email from David Frisbee that I'm authorized to read, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it says, please feel free to have your representatives read the following at your Thursday Conservation Commission meeting. The owners of the adjacent property, 42 Easton Street, were in support of the revitalization of Auburn House and the historic bulkhead. Protecting Brant Point, including the Coast Guard Station, critical to our island community from the imminent 21st century sea level rise already impacting Easton Street, is vital. Thus, this effort should include increasing the elevation of the bulkhead to the protective precedent town leadership has now established at Easy Street. The owners of 42 Easton will gladly follow suit in the mitigation of these flooding risks by upgrading their bulkhead to match the precedent elevation. And hopefully this will be the initiation of a communal effort to protect and preserve our historic island. All our best, David Frisbee. Let's see. That, I mean, the one thing I want to mention, and again, Don will get into it in more detail, the eastern end of the bulkhead on the 46 Easton Street property is not in while it's there, it's not in very good shape. And there's a gap between that part of the bulkhead and the bulkhead on the Frisbee property. And what we've now proposed is to fill that gap so that under current storm conditions, the storm, rain, etc., waves drive right through there and create all sorts of havoc, and they've been creating some erosion, and this would address that problem. So, Joe, if you could kind of jump, that one right there would be great. So the next series of slides were prepared by Howard Lincoln, who is the owner of 46 Easton Street, and he's also a professional engineer. And the purpose of these, and I'll go through them quickly, is to demonstrate for the commission, the history of bulkheading in this area. The original bulkhead, and I included it with the materials, but I won't call it out. Was authorized by a Chapter 91 license back in 1899. That bulkhead was reconstructed, rehabilitated twice, and as shown on this sketch, in front of 46 Easton Street. It's shown as bulkhead number 3. It was rebuilt in 1938. That's the last time the bulkhead at 46 Easton Street was rebuilt. So what this sketch shows was the approximate line of private bulkheads from the fall of 1961 at the breakers at 46 Easton Street and at the White Elephant. Next slide, please. Okay, this shows the approximate line of private bulkheads in the fall of 1970, when the breakers bulkhead had been replaced and a new steel sheet pile bulkhead was constructed in the early 1970s. And similarly, at the White Elephant, the bulkhead was extended out approximately 100 feet and rebuilt. A new steel sheet pile bulkhead was put in as well, and the space was backfilled to create new yard space and sidewalks. Next slide, please. This is a photo from 1966 at 46 Easton Street, and you can see the reason I included it is to show the family, of course, but also to show the top of the bulkhead and the amount of sand that was exposed at that time. Next bulkhead, next slide. Thank you. Okay. And then this shows is another, 1970. It's very similar to one that we did before. In fact, it may be the exact same one we did before. I can bump to 7. Are we on? That's 5, 6, 7. Yeah, that just shows that 32-foot wood bulkhead on the property line was demoed and replaced. When do we go to the next one? Number 8. Okay, these next 3 slides basically show the buildup of sand on the 46 Easton Street property. This is looking west toward the White Elephant, and the kind of sandy colored line shows you, water depth and then the elevations, which range up to about 16 inches of sand on top of the bulkhead. And it's juxtaposed against the approximate beach profile from 1966. So really the purpose here is just to show how much sand is built up in that area, both on the 46 Easton property and underwater over time. Next slide, please. This is the same thing, so I'm not going to repeat it. And the next one is another more detailed analysis of displaced beach sand over the 1938 bulkhead as of July 30th of this year. And it shows that the range of sand is from 12 inches to 20 inches. So this is a really unusual site. And what makes it unusual are 2 things. One is it's the only property on Eastern Street, at least that I can tell, and we'll show you some photos in a minute, that has not rebuilt its bulkhead in the last 70 or 80 years. It's also unusual because the buildup of the coastal dune, not zoom, the coastal dune is the result of abutting property owners rebuilding and extending their bulkheads, as we've just shown what has happened over time at the White Elephant and the breakers. Now we can go to the air photos that show, there's a series of photos of Easton Street that just show what current conditions along that street are. As you can see, as I stated, it's a series of, pretty much the entire shoreline is bulkheaded, except for 46 Easton Street, which is right there. And stay on that one for a second, Joe, because that one is really good. It shows how the extension, the White Elephant is immediately to the left, to the west. And it shows how that extension of the White Elephant bulkhead in approximately 1970, functions like a breakwater. And the sand accretes at 46 Easton Street up against that bulkhead. So the point, what's the point of all this history? The point is that it's an equity issue. 46 Eastern Street, the buildable area on the site has been reduced as a result of the buildup of resource area that was caused not by the owner of 46 Eastern Street, but instead by third parties. Now, I'm not saying that they did anything wrong. I don't mean to imply that at all. It's just that because the owner of 46 Eastern Street didn't do anything and was happy with the property the way it was, over time, what happened is what happens when something isn't continually being redeveloped, is the resource area rebuilds. And so that's what has happened here. So as you take this into consideration, yes, we've done a number of things to try to mitigate the impacts, to reduce the impacts from current conditions. But I also ask that you keep in mind, this is a very unique situation that, we are proposing to extend that dune even a little bit further for additional resource protection. And that, what we're proposing here is, not nearly as impactful as much of the remaining development on Eastern Street. I'm now going to ask Don Bracken to jump in. And Joe, if you could go back to, I think it's about the third slide, number 2. And Don will talk about the bulkhead, what they found when they were on the site, both in terms of the exposed bulkhead and the buried bulkhead, and what we're proposing to do with a new bulkhead.
Okay, first of all, we did go out and inspect the exposed bulkhead and sort of confirm the information that was shown previously on the profiles. The design that we came up with is pretty minimal. It actually tries to mimic what's already there as best we can. This is a bulkhead that's not subject to constant wave action. The importance of this bulkhead, as Dan had mentioned, is probably the biggest issue is the connection with the existing bulkhead to the east, where all the erosion has occurred. And if you've been at the site visit, you can see that, the age of the bulkhead and the eroded bolts and other hardware show that it's time for this bulkhead to be repaired. We did look at the top of the bulkhead when it was exposed. We could only dig so much. We couldn't really dig down along the face of it to determine the condition of that. But I would assume, again, that most of the hardware is probably rotted and should be replaced. So the design that we're showing at this stage is pretty much schematic. We think there are some deadmen currently behind the bulkhead. Rather than doing a typical deadman installation, we would use what most people are using these days, the helical screws, that are much less invasive and simpler and probably more cost efficient to use. As Dan mentioned, we'd like to fill in the back of the bulkhead so that the grade is even, and also bring up the bulkhead about 5 inches to match the height of the bulkhead to the east. And then to the west at the White Elephant, their bulkhead is about 6/10 or about 7 inches higher than our existing bulkhead. So when we rebuild it, it will still be a few tenths below the White Elephant's bulkhead. We think, part of the reason for the erosion is because the exposed bulkhead section, that's the lowest area within, that stretch. And when the flood water comes in, that's where it comes in first. And then when it recedes back out, it sort of gets funneled and concentrated in that area where the exposed bulkhead is. So we think by making it even with the bulkhead to the east and filling it back in up to the top. We can try to eliminate that focal point for the water receding and try to get it to flow out evenly like it probably did at one time. The depth of the timbers we would expect to be 10 feet long, which is kind of standard, we think, for the exposure that we're looking at. You know, typically the timber piles are embedded about 2/3 of the way, 1/3 exposed, 2/3 embedded. And I think I'd be happy to answer any other questions on the bulkhead, but I think that's it for the bulkhead.
Thank you. So Dan, are you guys complete with your presentation?
Yeah, we are ready for questions.
Okay. So Maureen, I thought I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, Don, there was something you mentioned that I wasn't clear on. So you talked about when you look at this, there seems to be there's accretion of that sand because of these uneven bulkheads. And you mentioned erosion. Do you mean the fact that it's not even across, or should it, what do you think would have happened naturally? Would this be a straight line and include, would the straight line be farther back than the part of the accretion now, or would it fill in the rest of that area with sand?
Well, just to be clear, the erosion is really not in front of the bulkhead that we're concerned with. It's what's behind the bulkhead. So I don't know if it probably could continue with more accretion over time, but I don't think the replacement of the bulkhead is going to affect that either way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, from what I've been told from people that have seen the water rushing out, that's where it rushes out in that area. And that's what's caused the erosion behind it. So again, it's not so much the erosion in front of it, it's behind it from the receding floodwater.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Joe?
Don, will the 10-inch pilings, will they be driven or excavated? What's the method of installing?
I think they'll be driven, probably vibrated in with those soil conditions. That's what I would expect.
Yep, go ahead, Joe.
And to Maureen's point, I've worked on that street for 6 or 8 years, whatever it was. And I would one time watch the storm surge come in and go right over that area, go across Easton Street and right into the wetland. That is the weakest link, if you will, of this entire area. And I just was always wondering what is going into the wetland across the street. And then for days, sometimes weeks, that area would be flooded because of the stormwater that would come over this bulkhead. So thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions related to the bulkhead. First, I understand that there's a Chapter 91 license from the 1800s. Is that license in compliance given the non-remediation and kind of management of the structure? And then second, as I've mentioned before, our regulations, Nantucket regulations, are written to indicate that any bulkhead repair or replacement, we're required to see an alternatives analysis indicating more environmentally friendly responses before bulkheads can be rebuilt. And I think actually, I understand what Joe is saying here about the water coming up through the area, but I think actually this could be a prime site where this type of analysis makes sense. We have a very unique situation here where a coastal dune has already kind of overtopped the bulkhead that's acting as a coastal bank. And the sand is accreting and the vegetation is accreting there. Both Mr. Bailey and Mr. Bracken indicated that they wanted to plant additional or put additional sand as coastal dune behind the proposed bulkhead to further hold that sediment. So if that is proposed, why don't we think about doing just a dune rather than repairing this bulkhead? It is a unique site. It's the only beach that's on Easton Street. And I think that is of benefit both to the resource areas and to the clients. So I would urge the representatives to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. I know the dune is very concerning to me when I think about a bulkhead proposal, because as our regulations are written, we can't be putting coastal erosion structures through dune fields. So with a dune resource area there, that will not allow us to permit a bulkhead as far as I read the regulations. And I have to agree with Seth here. This is the perfect location to have a living shoreline. As that bulkhead has been defunct for so long, the resource areas have come back. You know, they've rebounded essentially. So I think we really need to look at those living shoreline options. And again, really focus on the fact that we can't have coastal erosion structures within a dune field. I also just want to bring the applicant's attention to the local bylaw with our 20% improvement contingency in there. So even, you know, a pre-78 house that's been improved greater than 20%, you know, is no longer allowed to have that pre-78 protection. So I'm wondering, you know, where those percentage assessments are on this property, because I'm not sure what that will look like with the new structure. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Mark?
Madam Commissioner?
Oh,
Are we speaking just of the bulkhead now, Madam Chair?
I think the whole application is open, but we've certainly been focusing on the bulkhead so far.
Well, I'll reserve my comments for when we're going to speak of the other parts of the application.
Okay. Ian, would you like to talk about the bulkhead then?
No, I agree with what you and Seth have said. And so I want to talk about the other part of the application. Thank you.
Okay. Seth, did you want to talk about the bulkhead?
Yeah, just one more quick thing. It goes back to the point that's was mentioned about equity of bulkhead in the area. And I think that although that's a very admirable thing to strive for, it's not pertinent to our regulations. We're required to make our assessments based on wetland protection. So although I feel for your client, it's not really germane to how we make our decisions. And then also the mention of adding an additional bulkhead to connect 46 Easton Street to 42 Easton Street, that would definitely be considered a new structure. And in my opinion, even if the repair and replacement of the existing structure was somehow possible, there's no way, in my opinion, that that new structure would be permittable.
Thank you, Seth. Any more thoughts on the bulkhead, or are we ready to move on to the rest of the project? Looks like we're ready to move on. Mark, would you like to speak first and then Ian?
Sure. Yes. I'm looking at the plan. I have it on my iPad, and I think I could be supportive with the proper conditions and other support from the commissioners of renovating, restoring, or bringing back the existing house in its current location. Unfortunately, I mean, it's way into the 25-foot zone, but it is what it is, and it's probably grandfathered. But the other two, the two new lots are creating, to me, very troubling, because we're not really permitted to approve structures within the 50-foot, unless it's exceptional circumstances and there's no other alternatives. In this case, particularly for the lot to the east, where there is a totally new dwelling, they could move the dwelling back and be out of the 50-foot zone entirely. And I'm unsure of a rebuilding, how much they'll do on the existing to rebuild that, if it will be in place or if they'll be moving it up, down, or left or right. I assume they'll be moving it to the west. So at that point, they could also be outside the 50-foot zone. And those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Mark. Ian, would you like to speak?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I agree with Mark, and I absolutely, our performance standards are basically in black and white. That, you know, well, all structures which are not water dependent shall be at least 50 feet from a coastal beach. And I recognize that when the applicant was unable to get us to agree that it was water dependent, then they've come across with this sort of swap idea in terms of surface area. And we were, you know, we had an application before us recently at 67 Eastern Street, which was withdrawn because we basically said that we had to hold to our regulations. And right now, SBPF's appeal, one of the property owners at 77 Baxter Road is claiming that because he demolished a small habitable structure on his lot and then added more than 20% to his pre-78 building, that since the area involved of the demolished small dwelling would reduce the extension onto his original dwelling so that it would be less than 20 square feet, 20% if you did the math, that it was eligible for protection. So I feel that we need to be consistent. And so I look at this as being new construction. All new construction has to be outside of the 50-foot mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On a similar vein, but one thing I thought was missing from the plan is I appreciate the analysis of the change in surface area in between the 25 and the 50. But if you look at the amount of surface area that's going to be added within the 100-foot buffer, it's considerably more than current conditions on the ground. And I totally agree that moving structures back further from the resource areas is beneficial, but adding so much additional structure to the site doesn't really, in my mind, give the long-term net benefit that you're trying to achieve. So that's how I view it.
Thank you, Seth. Joe?
So I don't have a problem with rebuilding the bulkhead. I do applaud them for saving the old structure and bringing that forward, and trying to save as much of that as possible. I am having a problem with the new dwelling to the east within the 50. That does make sense. But I do think that if you take these houses up on piers, compared to the existing structures and the foundations that's there, I think there is a benefit by having them elevated and allowing, if there is the rain or flooding going on in this area, it's allowed to flow through this property. You know, White Elephant, there's no way any water is going to pass around there. It's going to become a shotgun through there. Same with the breakers, and you keep going down the down Eastern Street. I think it's really problematic. So I do like the way this is done. I think there is some modern thought to this that is beneficial. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Dave, are you raising your hand?
I am. Yes, I agree with Joe's comments. I think thinking of future rise in sea level and the problem with the velocity of floodwaters flowing through there. I also agree that the rebuild of the bulkhead will minimize that. And again, to reiterate what Joe said, having these houses elevated to storm level, flood level, I think will increase the ability of the water to flow through and not create such a fetch and catch there where it's velocity is increased. I think it's a good. I think it's an improvement, and it's a bit of a give for that area.
Thank you, Dave. I know to follow up with what some of the commissioners have said, the dwelling on the east is as well concerning to me, since it is new, that it could really be outside of the 50 for us. Because I think really when we're looking at these coastal projects, we had a single family home, one dwelling, one lot, and now we're doubling it. We're going to have 2 separate lots, 2 homes. When we're talking about infrastructure that'll be needed to service those homes in times of sea level rise, you're increasing the need in this area. And I think it would be better to have less. And I know this might allow for flow under, but we're increasing the roof runoff on this site quite significantly. And there's really nowhere to put that water. I mean, catch basins or catchment areas in the flood zone don't really function that well. So how we're going to deal with the increased roof runoff on this site, I think you guys will have to get creative. Joe?
Yeah, actually, I was kind of having a problem with that. You know, the rainwater is rainwater. I mean, whatever was going to hit those roofs would normally go on the ground. I was just thinking up with the structures being elevated that they could actually put the stormwater underneath the structure and it could just flow back into that, soil that's there. So it doesn't impede that. That was something I had thought about this weekend while I was reviewing the applications. So I kind of thought that was something that they could do as a way to, eliminate some of that water problem that could be created.
Okay. That's a good idea. I don't know how they would engineer that to not cause problems under the house with the runoff, but that I guess is on their engineers.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Can I give a quick suggestion, Ashley?
Yes, Don.
We ran into this same situation on Commercial Wharf, and what we ended up doing there is when we excavated underneath the structure, we put in like 12 inches of stone, and we took the roof gutters and ran perforated pipes under the building. So basically, yeah, you're taking that rain that would have hit the grass before and flow into Easton Street, because everything flows towards Easton Street. Now you're actually giving it, at least in the beginning of a storm, a better place and quicker way to infiltrate directly into the soil. So basically bypassing the roof structure and putting it underneath the structure. So I think we could address it the same way. And if we had to do calculations, we could show that, there wouldn't be any increase in runoff with that type of system. And actually with the stone, it actually allows for some storage so that the water has time to leach through the ground. During a typical storm. So obviously if we get a 100-year storm, nothing applies, even if we had space to put infiltration in.
Thank you, Don. Dave?
I think given what Don just said, it makes more of a reason to repair the bulkhead to try to contain the higher tides and stuff from going into that catching leach area for water.
Any other thoughts from commissioners before we look to the public? Looks like no. Jeff, do you want to man the public comment?
Sure, I will try my best to get through them. So I'm going to try to group comments together by people, because some people commented and kind of people intersected in between their comments. So I'll try to get them all kind of in a row. So our first commenter was Ann Taylor, and her comments are, for the project on Easton Street, there is a great deal of ground cover, completely obliterating the only gap with the view between the lighthouse and the White Elephant. But then she continues. This should be essential and required to the view. And then she has a few more. This is a big change forever that has always been there. Conservation of views may not be in your domain, but is a terrible natural resource to destroy. But further, there seems, with all this ground cover, that there is no pathway to allow access to the water line. This is required under Chapter 91, ensuring the public right to access between the high and low water for fishing, fouling, and navigating. Access is required by law. And then she continues. Every day you see people walk by and stop to look at the view. Blocking it all for everyone on the island is a further erosion of quality of life for everyone. And then her final one is, if you manage to block more water here, won't it still have to go somewhere, like into Children's Beach and the houses there? So that was Ann Taylor's comments. The next commenter, and then we'll jump back a little bit. RJ Turcott from the Nantucket Land Council commented, although the total amount of impervious surface is in the 50-foot buffer has been reduced and moved landward in the proposal, there is still a net increase in impervious surface on the property. While the Land Council acknowledges that past conservation commissions have approved similar expansions on Easton Street since 1990, this is an entirely different commission, and more importantly, new data on sea level rise and storm surge impacts has become available. This area of Nantucket is extraordinarily vulnerable to climate change, and the town of Nantucket should be discouraging expanding impervious surface in this area. The Select Board and Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee have taken critical steps in this direction, and the Conservation Commission should follow suit. And then to go back a little bit, some in between there, Howard Lincoln commented, sorry, there was one that just he was watching from, he responded to a comment from Ms. Taylor that the view from Easton Street is not within the Concom's purview. And he also provided, in relation to the bulkhead, that it has been defunct because there is no method to remove accreted sand over time. And then he asked, what wetlands are you protecting? And then he also added that the roof runoff argument is specious. The rainwater goes right into the ground as it has for 123 years. And if Howard and Ann are listening, our minutes taker, if you guys could just type in YouTube, wanted to clarify if you guys were abutters or what your relation to the filing was, just for the record, so she can add it to the minutes to properly identify those folks. And that's kind of it for oh, excuse me, there is one more. Bill McGowan, I missed, was there is a pathway plan from street to water should be expressed today. And he continued, one could argue there is nothing preventing owners from having tall hedges to block views. And Howard Lincoln has identified himself as the current owner.
The current owner?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
No problem. And that looks like it for right at the moment.
Yeah, those were a lot of public comments to navigate through, so I appreciate it. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick response to the public. Wetland scenic views are in fact within our purview, and we do have the ability to condition projects to comply with maintaining access to those views.
Thank you, Seth. Any other thoughts or questions from commissioners? So, Mr. Bailey, what would you like to do? Would you like to continue for 2 weeks and try and get some of these questions answered for us?
Yeah, but I mean, I can answer a couple of them right now.
Okay.
Just real quickly. I guess what I'd like to do is first remind the commission, you know, the alternative, you're presented with two alternatives. One is to leave the existing building where it is. And one is to have a new project where the amount of square footage of structure within 50 is substantially reduced. Um, you know, if we can't work through that, then, I think what will probably happen is this will be withdrawn and nothing will happen. And the existing structure will remain, and the amount of structure within the 50 will remain. With respect, I think somebody mentioned 67 Easton Street. I think that's a vacant lot. So that's a very different situation than what we have here. I wanted to address the comment regarding the bulkhead in Chapter 91. Chapter 91 will issue a license for bulkhead. That's not an issue at all. Whether it would have to be a new or an amended license, I'm not really sure how they would treat something like this. But bulkheading and water-dependent structures like that are well within Chapter 91's authority, and a bulkhead like this would be completely consistent with their regulations. The other thing about Chapter 91 that I want to touch on is Chapter 91 will require that the property owner provide access to the water. There'll be a path along the side of the, from Easton Street, along the side of the property with a publicly accessible path to the water there. So if the property is redeveloped, it will need a new Chapter 91 license, and there would be access. If the property is not redeveloped, it's grandfathered under Chapter 91, and there's no need to go get a license, so there won't be any access. And I also just want, this is always a dicey issue, because I don't recall who said it, but a commission is, and permitting boards are not bound by decisions of prior boards. But at the same time, property owners have a right to be treated equally. So when you've got a situation where every single other property owner on Easton Street has rebuilt their property, and since 1990, an awful lot of it's been approved by the commission, and this one property owner is told, well, sorry, you're too late. Global warming, sorry.
Mr. Bailey, I don't want to cut you off too much, but I want to really focus on our regs. And if you've been following our meetings, we've been asking people coming in for coastal bulkheads to go through the same step. We did it with someone in Quays with a pre-78 house that had an existing bulkhead. So I don't know that we need to track back through that history right now, but if you have answers to some of the questions, I think that would be appropriate.
Then we will, we'll pull together that information. So we continue for 2 weeks.
Okay. So this will continue until September 3rd.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, that moves us to Nantucket Island Land Bank at 101 Myacomet Avenue, and this is represented by Guthrie Diamond and Naomi Valentine.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, before we get to them, I will be recusing myself from this application.
Okay, thank you, Seth.
Hi, everybody. I'm Guthrie Diamond from the Nantucket Land Bank, and I am absolutely here to answer any questions that the commission may have specifically related to the land bank or the property, but I'll be handing it over to Naomi Valentine from SWCA to present our projects and especially the more technical aspects of it.
Thank you, Guthrie. Hello, everybody. So as I was just introduced, my name is Naomi Valentine. I work for SWCA Environmental Consultants, and I'm representing the Nantucket Islands Land Bank today. Rachel Freeman, who submitted the notice of intent, was not able to make the meeting today, and I assisted her with the pond management plan and the production of the NOI application itself. So as you've already noted in the NOI narrative and the form, this proposed project is for, oh, thank you for that screen share, is for the management of parrot feather, which is an invasive aquatic plant within Birchall's Pond, which is located just west of Myacomet Pond on the northern portion of Myacomet Pond, which you can see on the southeastern corner of the figure that's shown on the screen right now. We are requesting a 5-year order of conditions for this management plan if possible. And I'll just move forward with the details of the plan. So Birchall's Pond is a small man-made pond. It's approximately a half an acre in size. And like I just said, is located proximate to Myacomet Pond, which is regulated as a Class B water body and is approximately 43.5 acres in size. While none of the work is happening within Myacomet Pond, I just wanted to mention it as the water from Birchall's Pond does flow into Myacomet Pond, and the Nantucket Islands Land Bank is particularly concerned about preserving the quality within the pond, within Myacomet Pond, as well as the habitat. And the parrot feather, which is a very aggressive submerged aquatic plant, could take valuable habitat from the native aquatics that are within Myacomet Pond. The extent of parrot feather within Birchall's Pond is seen in that orange hatching area, so along the perimeters of the main pond, and that little connector channel, thank you for that, that is located between Birchall's and Myacomet Pond, where the water flows into Myacomet. The section that the parrot feather is present, only approximately 2% cover within that channel. It extends for approximately 260 linear feet, and the edges of dense parrot feather coverage within the pond itself, Birchall's Pond, covers approximately 3,700 square feet, and the coverage within that barrier is a 90% cover. And I just wanted to clarify that point because in reviewing my NOI narrative, I realized that wasn't very clear. The parrot feather within Birchall's Pond is not covering 90% of the entire land underwater, just within those perimeter sections that are mapped in that figure that you're looking at right now. So the water clarity within the pond is fairly poor, and although there hasn't been any recent water quality samples taken and sent to a lab, there haven't been any historic algal blooms within the pond, so we're making an assumption that there's not an elevated amount of phosphorus and that the pond is not eutrophic, but it's certainly possible that if the parrot feather were to fill in more and more sediment could accumulate from the wetland system that flows into Birchall's Pond, that phosphorus loading could increase. That's a common byproduct of overgrowth of invasive vegetation. The water depth within Birchall's Pond is about 3 feet on average, and the parrot feather is extending right now just within the shallowest portions of the pond, but could certainly spread into anything where light could penetrate to the base, which 3 feet would be a perfectly reasonable depth. There are various turtles and fish present within the pond, and the work proposed for this project is completely within land underwater, so it does not include the banks, but is contained within the banks themselves to both the channel and Birchall's Pond. The proposed work is to perform herbicide application using a relatively new approved herbicide called Procelicor. Previous attempts have been made to manage the parrot feather. There was an order of conditions issued by the Conservation Commission to do benthic barrier application to try to smother the parrot feather, which was fairly successful in the first year. But when the mats were removed and the vegetation was then removed, as you're supposed to do during that type of application, there was fragmentation that occurred and then flowed downstream and actually did end up creating a population within Myacomet Pond itself. So the second year, they made the decision to leave the benthic barriers in place to avoid that happening again. It just so happened that a perfect storm of events occurred where the parrot feather that had propagated within Myacomet Pond was destroyed that following winter. The water was fairly low. I believe there was some sort of ditching or draining that happened within Myacomet Pond, and there was a really solid freeze in that winter, and so the population was completely wiped out from Myacomet Pond. But at this time, the parrot feather that's within Birchall's Pond is right back to the levels that it was before, because there hasn't been a successful control using the benthic barriers as is. And the land bank had been waiting for the approval of Prusellicor specifically for this project. I don't believe that there is any parrot feather anywhere else on the island, and it is a very aggressive, invasive plant. And so they really feel strongly that it needs to be managed as quickly as possible to prevent the repeated potential population with the Myakama pond, and also potential spread throughout other ponds on the island, because it can spread through fragmentation, and sometimes that can be carried through waterfowl. I can go into a few more details, but I think at this point it might be a good idea to take questions from the Conservation Commission. And does that seem like a good course of action to you?
Yeah, that's perfect, Naomi. Thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Joe?
I'm just glad that the pond was drained by accident.
I know.
It would have been quite a mess. So I thought when Rachel came in, Rachel Slozak came in, that it was just in that pond. Has it spread down that chute? Is that a recent?
I don't believe that's, oh, I'm sorry.
No, that was the one thing when I looked at that one photo, I don't remember when Rachel made the presentation that was there. So it looks like it's spread, but I'm forgetting, over the couple of years what's happened.
I don't believe it's spread more in the past year, but Guthrie, are you aware if before the first NOI application, if there was parrot feather within the channel?
Before the first NOI application would be a little bit before my time with the land bank. But I do know there were in place screens at the bottom of that little channel to try and prevent any spread of the parrot feather into Myakama pond. And so I believe those were in place, I think 2 years ago, which would have been around the time of the benthic barriers.
They are they are not dense at all. It's about 2% cover, sort of sporadic throughout that channel. And I do know that Rachel said they had attempted to get rid of some of the parrot feather within the channel as well. But as I'm sure a lot of the commission members know, it's very easy to fragment and spread. So they've been very careful with that.
Jeff, do you have something to add?
I do. I was sadly, that is not before my time. So when we looked at the first project with the benthic barriers, I think there were a couple really small kind of pioneer colonies of parrot feather within that channel, Joe. It was very slight, but there wasn't enough to use the benthic barriers to try to remove it. And they were talking about trying to remove some of it just by, careful removal by hand and installing those screens to prevent any chance of fragmentation getting loose or getting free from there. But I don't think that even with the benthic barriers and some of the fragmentation that occurred, that the populations in that channel managed to persist a little bit, and it's kind of patchy through there. It's not at all like what's around the edges of Birchall Pond. It's kind of a few here and a few there, but they fortunately haven't spread much beyond that yet.
Thank
you. Be good to get rid of before they do.
Thank you, Jeff. And Jeff, while you're kind of on, so they asked for a 5-year permit. We can't do that, right? We can only do 3.
Yeah, our bylaw kind of sticks to 3, but they would still be eligible for extensions. So it would be something that you could kind of build into the order. I would suggest the end of the 3 years that they could come in with kind of a report for how it's going, and could just extend the order at that point, kind of do it all at once. But that's something that we can work out. But unfortunately, I would love to issue orders for invasive species stuff that were for better amounts of time than 3 years. But our local bylaw kind of makes it a little sticky.
That makes sense. That's reasonable.
Thank you, Jeff. Joe?
Well, I kind of think it's nice that every 3 years they kind of come in and give us an update. This is kind of a scary, parrot feather is very scary. And I was really concerned when Rachel came in a couple of years ago. So I'm glad that they have something in place and a plan that hopefully works. And I pray that it does. So thank you.
No, I agree. And Jeff, is this something we could condition that they are actually coming in or submitting photos on a yearly basis to see the change after each application?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of their proposal includes a level of monitoring that's there, but you certainly can require photos. Typically for herbicide applications, we require at least annual reports for how much herbicide was used, who the licensed applicator was that applied it. Pretty normal things like that for monitoring projects of this nature. As a complete aside, I think this actually also fits really well with some of our best management practices for invasive species, where they're going to a different control method after other methods that haven't been as successful and kind of scaling up. And I think this is a really good example of people using active monitoring to refine their management practices to get the desired result that they're looking for after trying less invasive means. So I think that we don't see that very often. So I think that's nice to see.
Yes. Any other thoughts or questions from commissioners? No, so we can open it up to the public. Jeff, do you want to man the public again?
Sorry about that. I put myself back on mute. Yes, RJ Turcotte of the Nantucket Land Council has a comment. His comments are, our knowledge of parrot feather is that it's incredibly difficult to eradicate, and manual removal is not an option. Gnome herbicides are ineffective on parrot feather, and this should be addressed before it takes over one of Nantucket's great natural resources. Nantucket Land Council is hesitant to support use of chemicals, but this is the most viable option in this case. Parrot feather is one of the most tenacious invasive species we have here on Nantucket. And then he says, thank you.
Thank you. So I think we understand that we need to get rid of this stuff as quick as possible. If there are no other questions from commissioners, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close this one?
I believe that we do. We have all of the required information if you guys don't have any other questions.
Okay. If there are no other questions from the commission, Naomi and Guthrie, would you like to close?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, we would.
Okay. So Mark, are you making the motion? Oh, you're muted.
All right, for a 3-year permit, thank you.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
And Joe seconds. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg is recused, Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye. Good luck, ladies.
All right. So that carries with Seth Engelborg recused. Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll report
you.
back to you.
And that moves us on to Nantucket Conservation Foundation, Windswept Bog and Barnard Valley Road. And it looks like Jeff Carlson is going to take this one.
Yes, sorry about that, Ian. This is an application that we heard last week that Karen Beatty did for the Phragmites removal in the Windswept Bog area that's there. They were waiting for their natural heritage determination. And Karen asked, she wasn't able to join us tonight, if I could just handle it to say that that determination has come in, and they provided some comments that we can add into the order. But other than that, the project is still as proposed to do the clip and drip treatment on those pioneer stands of Phragmites.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions from commissioners about this one? Looks good. Looks like the public is quiet. So if there's no comments, is there a motion to approve? Joe?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Seconded by Dave.
Second.
I think Dave got that one. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to BSS Hummock Pond Road LLC and Hummock Pond Holdings LLC at 287 and 289 Hummock Pond Road. And this is represented by Brian Madden and Don Bracken.
Thank you very much. Since the last meeting, 2 meetings ago, we submitted revised information, revised plans, including relocating the pool and deck area outside of the 50-foot buffer zone to the northerly BVW associated with Hummock Pond. You can see that footprint being located outside the 50-foot buffer zone resulted in a 176 square foot reduction in structure for the reduction. So the proposed redevelopment matches the existing conditions, doesn't encroach any closer to Hummock Pond. Actually, it's pulled back by a foot. And the proposed pool has been reduced in size it's currently 10 by 16. We provided some specs on that shallow fiberglass installation, again, for the easy install and removal as needed. I guess the only additional plan detail, there was an outdoor shower depicted on the north side of the garage. That's outside the 50-foot buffer zone. I can go through the all the renovation relocation updates, but I think I went through that in detail at the first meeting. If anyone needs a refresher, I can certainly touch upon that. But just big picture, relocating the structure on 289 to 287 and moving that house off or demoing. And the garage is shifting further away from the resource areas out to the 50-foot buffer zone, whereas right now it's 31 feet. There's a cumulative net restoration of over 5,000 square feet of buffer zone that will be restored here. And yeah, I guess for now, I'll just turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions from commissioners? I know, Brian, I appreciate you giving this another look and kind of shifting things slightly. Joe, you have a comment or question?
Yep, through the chair. Brian, is that boardwalk going to remain to the far west side of the lot?
No, that would be removed. That's actually off property.
Too bad.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no, so we can take a look at the public, see if they have anything. Looks like nothing from the public as of yet. Jeff, do we have everything we need to close this one?
We do.
If there's no questions or comments, Brian, would you like to close?
Please.
Is there a motion to close?
Motion to close.
All right, motion made by Maureen. Is there a second?
Yes.
Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal. Oh, you're muted.
Aye.
Engelborg.
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding.
Aye.
LaFleur.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
And that moves us on. Oh, I might have missed this in our continuances. So Mary Jo Buckland at 113 Hummock Pond Road is continued until September 3rd, which I may have missed. And that brings us to Ocalo Realty Trust at 12B Ocalo Lane. And this is represented by Don Bracken.
Yes, this project was originally approved with an order of conditions back in 2014. We did submit an extension for the applicant up to April 16th, 2020. When they made some plan changes and we changed the site plan, we realized that the order of conditions had expired. So this is a new application for the proposed work, which is similar to what was previously approved. The driveway that you see on the plan, the first 120 feet or so, is the same location and design as the original approval. The original plan had a barn more to the south side of the property. The current proposed plan calls for garage barn to the north of the property with a fenced-in garden area to the west, in a greenhouse. All structures will be outside the 50-foot buffer. A portion of the garage barn will be within the 100-foot buffer, approximately 80 feet from the isolated vegetated wetland. This is a review under the local bylaw only. And there is a letter in the file. We had David Haynes go out and reconfirm the wetland flags that we had staked out based on the coordinates that we had from the original wetland flags. So I think with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Don. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Don. The only question I have is the current natural heritage and endangered species maps are showing that IVW as a vernal pool. I know it's not a certified one, but it's showing up in their database.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering why review from any GSP isn't required in this case.
Well, my understanding, because it's not an official vernal pool, that we wouldn't have to apply to natural heritage. I think David Haynes also noted that in his letter that's in the file. I don't know if he noted whether or not we need to apply to natural heritage, but we did note in the application that it was a potential vernal pool. So.
Thank you. Does, if I may, does staff have any recommendation on that?
Jeff?
Yeah, we've run into that situation before, Seth, and we've asked Natural Heritage. They require for priority habitat, estimated habitat, and certified vernal pools. And then they have a number of areas marked as potential vernal pools that they strongly encourage people to look at or look into certifying those, but they don't specifically comment on applications under the WPA for potential vernal pools.
So I know I had a similar question to Seth about the vernal pool because I saw that in the packet. Jeff, is this something we can require them to go check out to confirm that it is or is not a vernal pool, since the buffer zones are different?
We've asked that question before. And I think the issue that we've always run into is a little bit of seasonality for certifying those vernal pools and looking into the certification of those pools. Obviously, some of the criteria is met with this, where there doesn't appear to be an obvious outlet from the, pool. And I personally haven't surveyed for them, but I'd be highly doubtful that there's a fish population in that pool. We've never asked someone to specifically look at it before unless there's very clear evidence that it's the case. Whether we found obligate species in the area or something that's there. So we haven't done it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we absolutely can't.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth?
Thank you, Jeff. Whether or not we decide to do that for this current application, I think that's something we should definitely have a discussion about for the future.
Yeah.
And I certainly can understand the concern with that. But this one, I think, may be a little different because, a lot of the work has already been done and the clearing has already been done down to the 50. So hopefully you consider that, whatever you decide.
Thank you, Don.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say we inspected that site as recently as today again, and the site is in compliance with the previous orders and is in great shape, and the vegetation around that area is relatively undisturbed for what was permitted before. So they've been meeting the requirements of the previous permits.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? All right, so we can look to the public and see if they have comments. Looks like no. So Jeff, do we have everything we need to close for this then?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Is there a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this moves us on to Paul C. Shepherd at 41 Nonantum Avenue, and this is represented by David Haynes.
Good evening, David Haynes for the applicant. This is an application to do a renovation to an existing house on Nonantum Ave, between Nonantum Ave and a bluff that drops down to a coastal dune, and then the coastal beach below, beyond, and the Atlantic Ocean. We did not flag the bluff out as a coastal bank because the land subject to coastal storm flowage is at elevation. It's a VE zone on the land, on the seaward side of the coastal dune at elevation 10. The toe of the bluff is up at elevation 14 or 15. And so it is not considered a coastal dune under DEP policy. There is so we've used the setbacks off at the toe of the bluff is the start of the coastal dune. And we've shown the 50 and the 100-foot setback. The existing house will be renovated with a small addition on the north or the upland side of the house, away from the wetland resource area. There is a proposed silt fence that goes around the house for any kind of work that is necessary. The renovation includes raising the roof slightly on the back side of the house, and whatever other features to the house that they're going to change or maintain. There is the component of the septic system will be upgraded. All that work will be outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. There is a proposed new well shown on the plan up in the northwest corner of the site. And there will be a water line going to that. That's if with the final design of the septic system, it is necessary, because there are 2 existing wells, but if they can't be outside of the 100-foot setback from the septic system, we will put in a new well. There will be no grade change, just minimal grading around the house and landscaping, and all the renovation will occur, except for the addition, would occur within inside the existing footprint. And basically that is it.
Thank you, David. Any questions from commissioners? Looks like no. We'll look and see if the public has any questions or comments about this one.
Haven't had any come in.
Okay. Jeff, do we have everything we need to close this?
Yes, you do.
Okay. So if there are no questions from commissioners, is there a motion to close?
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right, I'll give that to Ian. Mark, did you want the second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
And that moves us on to Wallach AC LLC at 45 Hulbert Avenue. And this is represented by Stan Humphreys, Jeff Blackwell, Sarah Alger, and Brian Swain.
Good evening. For the record, this is Stan Humphreys from ECR, representing the applicant. The project basically consists of raising and reconstructing a single-family dwelling. The existing dwelling currently partially lies within the 50. No structures within the 25. The predominant vegetation in that area, though, is lawn. There's a coastal dune to the west, a coastal beach to the north, with a coastal bank protected by an existing licensed bulkhead. Since the reconstruction of the dwelling is not water dependent and is proposed within the 50 feet of the beach, dune, and the bank on the north and west sides respectively, waivers are requested, and we would hope that the commission would consider the following overall net benefits. There's a smaller footprint in the new building within the within the 50. There's a reduction in the driveway area by 944 square feet. I was remiss. The smaller footprint of the dwelling is by 62 square feet. There's an elimination of coastal floodwater displacement by 1,080 square feet. The first floor is going to be elevated above the 100-year base flood. Existing right now, it's below the 100-year flood elevation. So that's a distinct improvement. And we proposed an additional native vegetative buffer strip along the bulkhead where there presently exists a 5-foot wide sand strip. We have received comments from an abutter about that vegetation and have changed the species list from what was indicated in the notice of intent to now what is listed as a note on the plan, so that it's a lower ground cover vegetation. Some area will have beach grass, and that's probably the longest or highest, I should say, the vegetation will be in that buffer strip. So that's a basic summary presentation. Will be available for questions.
Thank you, Stan. Are there any questions from commissioners? I can kick it off, I guess. So I know when I looked at the original house or what's sitting there now, it looks like there's a stone patio that's maybe going to be replaced with a porch. And a porch we would consider structural, where the patio wouldn't have been considered structural. So I'm wondering what the square footage shift is there, because it is in a no build zone essentially for us.
If it's not stated on the plan, we'll have to get that information to you at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts or questions from commissioners? Joe?
So by removing this, they're going to lose their pre-78 statuses, right?
Under our local bylaw, yes.
Wanted to get that on the record form.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions from commissioners before we look to the public?
Well,
Ian?
it's you know, it does bring up the same issues as Easton Street. So similar issues.
Yeah, I can see that, Ian, but in some ways, because they're essentially replacing something that was already permitted there, I think it's a little different than what we just heard, because it's not new structure. It's hopefully to replace the structure and make it flood compliant was my read on this, but maybe I'm off.
Well, I take your point, Madam Chair. Could we have a clarification?
Stan, that might go to you. Is this intended to make the structure flood compliant?
Oh, definitely. And there's some interior changes that have prompted the prospective buyers to go with this design. The structure is within the 50 is essentially in the same footprint. If you look closely at the plan, you can see some minor differences. But I'm also aware of the fact through the architect that in 2015, a similar project was approved at next door at 43 Hulbert.
Okay. Joe?
An advantage. So I agree with you, Madam Chairman. It's certainly an advantage to be above the floodplain. And it's also with flood vents and removal of structures below the existing building that they're able to have an improvement with in terms of stormwater displacement.
Thank you, Stan. Joe, did you have a question or comment?
It just says in their introduction that the building was going to be raised, so maybe I just misread that. So that's why I was thinking this is a whole new structure.
So Stan, is this going to be a whole new structure, or is it?
It is going to be a whole new structure, yes.
Okay.
Total raise and rebuild.
So they will lose their pre-78, but it's essentially
correct.
A 1-for-1 structurally.
It goes back to Ian's comment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Ian.
I think it would be helpful for us to see drawings and photographs of what's being demolished and what's being proposed to be put there.
Thank you, Ian. I agree that would be helpful. And more detail on like the basement foundation that's currently there and how that improvement's going to work. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners?
And Madam Chair, if I may, through you, I'd like to know the specific property that the gentleman was referring to that we approved in 2015.
Yes. Stan, do you have that address?
It's next door, 43 Hulbert. I said that.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Looks like not. So we can look to the public to see if there's public comment. Yes.
Madam Chair, could I make a comment?
Yes, Brian.
So I actually represent in the matter 38 Holbert Ave Nominee Trust. And perhaps this question can be answered by Stan, but I was just wondering about the particular plantings that are proposed along the bulkhead and if they would have a mature height of greater than 3 feet. My client enjoys the wetland scenic views from upland. And we just wanted to make sure that those plants aren't going to be too high or obstruct their view.
I think Stan can answer that. From what I saw on the list, though, it looked like fairly low growing stuff. But Stan, can you confirm that?
Yes, as I stated in the presentation, beach grass is still included, but I don't expect that to go over 2 feet.
So Stan, this is kind of a follow-up. So have you removed like the panicum and the goldenrod that you had planned to plant?
That's correct.
Oh, that's unfortunate, honestly, because those are important habitat plants for diversity. And they're not that tall.
I agree with the comment on the goldenrod specifically.
Yeah. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In a similar light to that, I know false heather was mentioned. That's a low-growing shrub that doesn't get more than 6 inches tall. I think that definitely could be put back into the planting plan. And then there are other goldenrod species as well. I think they mentioned seaside, but there are about 15 different species of goldenrod that can be found natively on Nantucket. Some of them grow shorter than others, and they're almost all salt tolerant. So I would like to request the applicant find a little bit of, or find some species to add a little bit of diversity back into that planting strip, while also being cognizant of the neighbor's request to have lower vegetation. I think it's plenty easy to get both things done at the same time.
Thank you, Seth. I fully agree with you there, because I was so happy to see other plants besides just American beach grass in there. So I would love to still be happy and see that diversity. Stan, is that something you think you guys could look into?
Sure, and I think we can get some architectural renderings to you if we continue for 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Maureen?
Yeah, Stan, I do have a question about the respective footprints of the old and the new. Are they, and because it's the one site map we have is just, it's just hard for me to see which is which. Are they essentially putting it in the same place, or is it getting moved? It's hard for me to see.
Well, on the site plan, I believe there's a heavier line. I don't have it right in front of me. I can get it. Let's see. Yeah, the heavy line is the outline of the new proposed building. And then there's a lighter gray line with hatched lines coming off and around the perimeter.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's largely the same footprint, but with
the new footprint within the 50, which is basically the ocean side and side towards the dune, is 62 square feet less than the existing.
Okay. And you have, let's see, and there's a porch that is, well, part of that is within the existing footprint, but then there's an additional piece as well. So that's new from because that was a patio before, and now it's going to become an enclosed porch. Is that?
I'm not clear on whether it's enclosed, to tell you the truth, but yes, it's changing from a stone patio to a porch.
Yeah, so that's a new structure there. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ian, did you have a question or did you have your hand up?
Perhaps it should wait until the next meeting, but as Joe said, this absolutely looks like new construction within the 50-foot area. So I don't see how we can deny it with one applicant and approve it with another. So I don't know if Jeff Carlson would like to weigh in on this, or if we need to give this some thought with the drawings before the next, for our next meeting in 2 weeks' time.
Jeff, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think that's a valid question, Ian. I think once we get the architecturals in, that may become a lot more clear for what that's going to look like as far as structure that's going. I know in the public comment, not to jump ahead, Luke Thornwell, who I believe may be the architect in this case, I know he's a residential designer on island, did make the comment that the proposal is to demolish the existing structure and replace with a new one. So I think that would tend to lean towards some kind of new structure. I know past practice of the commission, we've had a number of spots where we've allowed reconstructions of dwellings within kind of existing footprints for varying reasons. So I think it'll depend upon what that's coming back and some of the reasoning for reconstruction, whether it's, you know, structural rot or not having integrity or doing those things. But I think the applicant could provide justification and information for why that's the case for the next meeting.
Thank you.
And excuse me, sorry, just a quick comment, Ashley.
Yes, Maureen.
Yeah, no, and that's why I was asking about what looked to me to be an absolute addition, you know, no matter what. If this is a replacement of a rotting structure, or, you know, this is you know, just a, you know, let's put something new there. So so that will be very useful to know for next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. So Seth, and then we'll go to Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in the same vein, I think it's within our obligation to have the representative present an alternatives analysis of why elevating the current structure and renovating in place isn't a feasible alternative. And I'd look to them to let us know why that is. And I would be interested to see the more detail about the plans for the raise and rebuild as well. But I think if we have both potential alternatives in front of us, it will make more sense as to what they're suggesting to do and why.
Thank you, Seth. Mark?
Yeah, I'll sort of repeat my comments of earlier in that I look fondly upon a restoration rebuild of the existing house, but it might be more of a stretch to allow total new construction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Jeff, maybe now we'll try for the public comment or to finish it.
Yep, we only had one more. I got the one from Luke Thornwell in sneakily in my other comments. But RJ Turcott of the Nantucket Land Council just said, Jeff, for request for clarification, is the proposed structure closer to the resource area than the existing structure? So I think what he's referring to, not to put words into his mouth, but if you look up in kind of the extreme northwest corner of the proposed structure, is that corner does look to be closer to the timber bulkhead portion that's there, where parts of it are moving farther away. So I think it's dependent upon which resource area you are looking at for closer, because I believe that same corner would be technically further away from the dune than the existing structure, but would be slightly closer to the bulkhead. So hopefully that clarifies it for him, and that's just based upon the plan. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other final questions or comments to bring to the applicant? Okay, it looks like no. So Stan, would you like to continue for 2 weeks?
Yes, I believe 2 weeks is fine.
Okay, so this will continue until September 3rd.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then that moves us on in the agenda to Nantucket Electrical Company at 1 Candle Street. And this is represented by Melissa Kaplan and Adam Wilding.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Okay. You caught me off guard. I thought there was one more before. I'm Melissa Kaplan with the BSC Group representing the Nantucket Electric Company. I am not sure if Adam made it on. He may be jumping on here in a minute. But NECO, I'm just going to use an abbreviation. NECO is proposing to upgrade their distribution feeder line from the Candle Street substation located at 1 Candle Street. As part of the upgrades, they're proposing to replace several switch gears at the Candle Street substation and install new underground duct bank and manholes, as well as enlarge a few manholes along several roads near the substation. The entire project is located within the 100-year floodplain corresponding to land subject to coastal storm flowage. In addition, 2 manholes proposed to be enlarged are located within the 100-foot buffer zone to coastal bank. The proposed work is entirely limited to existing developed areas, including the substation property and roadway layouts. Because the substation site is located within the 100-year floodplain, the relocated switchgears will be elevated on a metal platform from the above the base flood elevation to provide protection from flood damage and flooding. NECO has chosen to meet the American Society of Civil Engineers standard for flood-resistant design and construction requirements, and will specifically elevate the platform 2 feet above the base flood elevation. The ground elevation where the platform is going is 5 feet, and the base flood elevation is 9 feet. So the platform will be elevated, will be installed at elevation 11 feet. As a result, the platform will be elevated approximately 6 feet from the ground and placed on eight pilings with foundations. To connect the switch gears to the substation and the distribution feeder line, the new underground duct bank and manholes will be installed at the substation site along Washington Street, South Water Street, and Broad Street, all within land subject to coastal storm flowage. In addition, 4 existing manholes along Candle Street and Easy Street will be enlarged. In addition, as part of the approvals that we've already gotten from the Nantucket Historic District Commission and the Planning Board, they requested that we replace the metal chain fencing with some more significant screening. So they want 6-foot high solid board fencing and landscaping to provide screening of the platform. So all the way along Commercial Street and along the back side of the substation, they want the solid board fencing. Overall, the project will protect important energy infrastructure from potential flooding impacts and future sea level rise, making facilities more resilient for the residents of Nantucket. The project will also ensure NECO can provide safe, reliable electric service to the region during large storms and flood events. And that's the presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is an essential project. The only potential issue I have or thing I'd like to see be improved is in the landscaping screening plants that are proposed. It's all non-native species that have easily substitutable native species. So you have Quercus robur on there, it's the English oak. You could use something like white oak, Quercus alba, and then there's a Japanese cedar. You could use the red cedar, which is native here, and then there's a Panicum virgatum shenandoah. It's a cultivar. I'd love to see that just be the native non-cultivar species. And I think you could achieve pretty much the same look that you're going for as proposed on the plan, but it'd be a kind of a nice native species mix as a good example for that area of Nantucket.
I thought that the species were specifically given to us by the Historic Commission, but it does make more sense to use the native species. I agree. I can definitely go back and check that, and if not, I have no problem. I'd rather use the native. The Historic Commission sometimes has interesting requests.
Thank you, Melissa. Jeff, I think, has a follow-up, and then Seth.
Yeah, I would say from our end, and just to give Melissa a little flexibility, I think I would suggest if we condition those to be native species, then when she goes and speaks to the Historic Commission, if they're willing to make that switch and has that backing from the commission, then they're all set to go. And if not, worst case scenario, Melissa can come back to do a minor modification to the permit with other species with an explanation. But I think that's the easiest, cleanest route to go, and tend to agree that, we've definitely been encouraging native species. We are actually racking our brains in the office today for other examples of English oak on island, and we're really having trouble outside of a really tiny one on the Land Bank's little arboretum property out at Reyes Pond, where there's an old one, but we were really stuck besides that.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth, you had a follow up, and then Ian.
Thank you, and thank you, Melissa, for being willing to consider that request. It is in an area of town where there is a lot of non-native landscape trees, but I think as we're moving forward, setting the positive example of providing these native trees, which provide better ecosystem function and also can achieve the exact same aesthetic that you're looking for, would be great. I know the HGC sometimes has this very specific look they're looking for, but I think we can, with the commission's backing, convince them that we can achieve that exact same look with native plantings.
I agree.
Ian?
Well, so we have an English walnut, one of two, on our property in Hussey Street. And so Seth, keep away from us. We like it. So, and there we have it. You have English tourists down there. So an English walnut, English oak, might make them spend more money. I don't know, but I'm not really, that's not our purview. But the fence is, and so is that fence the way it's going to look, so it's designed to allow water to flow through? Because I think the presenter mentioned a solid fence, and in the illustration it isn't actually solid, and so I think the fence that we see there is one we would prefer.
Do you have the visual simulations I submitted in the NOI that you could bring up? Whoever's in charge of that.
36, I think. The proposed new installation view. So I was just wondering, I was hoping that would be the fence, but
they wanted what's called a standard wood, solid board fence, just one of those 6 foot high wood fences. So I can imagine the water will flow through the little spaces of underneath, but it's not going to be elevated or anything like the rest of, that's a good point, the rest of the infrastructure.
So that's the picture.
Yeah. I'm not allowed. Am I allowed to share my screen? I know you said don't share screen, but
oh, here it comes.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. So we clearly would want fencing that would allow water to flow through.
That's a good point.
Yes, Ian, I think you're correct on that. If we're in the velocity zone, we'd need to allow flow through.
We're not in a velocity zone at all. It's just a normal 100-year floodplain. But if you want to make that a condition of the permit, we'll go back to the HDC with that. But I think their purpose is they want to screen, since the platform's being elevated, I would think that what they want is higher, not if we lift it up and give a little bit of space underneath to have some space for the water to flow under.
Madam Chair, through you to Jeff, doesn't it flood there?
Yeah, I think the easy answer, and not to sound really glib, is yes, because it's in the flood zone.
Yeah, it's the 100-year floodplain. It's just not the velocity zone. That's different.
Yeah, we're in like the AE, I want to say elevation 8 or elevation 9 zone here.
9, yeah, 9.
So, so during the larger, coastal storm events, I think what they're saying is the maximum flood elevation is elevation 9, which would be somewhat higher than portions of that site. So I think you could anticipate some level of flooding there during those really significant coastal storms.
And I do want to point out that this is not completely enclosing the site. It's just on two sides, the street side and the front side, and obviously the substations there, but is not being enclosed. It's just the back side where the houses are.
Thank you, Melissa. So since this isn't velocity, then we don't need to require flow through, correct?
No, so the AE zone is typically the zone that we're most commonly dealing with as far as land subject to coastal storm flowage. The velocity zone is that area kind of right adjacent to the immediate coastline. So we're most often dealing with that AE zone. So I think looking at it and making sure that the question isn't flow, it's are you altering the ability for floodwaters to move and flood storage capacity. So if you feel that, elevating it off the ground and providing some level of porosity through the fence allows that system to function and not damage the flood storage capacity or those waters to shift or move, I think it would be meeting the performance standards in that case.
There is no performance standards for land subject to
Oh,
coastal.
excuse me. That's just the requirements. All right. I hate to because DEP will yell at me for saying performance standards because I haven't put them out yet. But the typical
I think
requirement for flood.
Logically, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, Jeff. It makes sense to not, if we're doing all this work to elevate the platform, it doesn't make any sense to not have some sort of space underneath the fencing for, hold on, I'm sorry. Let me take a step back. Because of the electrical substation nature of the site, I don't know if we can provide a gap underneath the fence for safety purposes. Now that I just remember that, and I don't know if Adam is on, but I don't think we can make a space to where animals or humans can go under the fence and get in the site. However, I don't know if there's any way that we could still close this out tonight and I can get back to you on that because it's right now currently anyone can walk on that site because it is open and not there's no like electrical infrastructure, and these switch gears are going to be enclosed in those green boxes that are already on site, and you can find them on your street. So actually, now that I think about that, I think that's not true. I think in this situation, we can have some sort of gap under the fence. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm done.
Thank
a lot
you.
of people's hands.
I'm going to go with Jeff first and then Seth and Ian.
So I think the easy answer to this question is if you guys are concerned about the fence and you agree that the concept of the fence is okay, I think simply in the conditions you could have a requirement that the fence be designed and installed in a manner to least restrict the flowage of floodwaters on and off of the site. And then when they come in for a certificate of compliance, you can ensure that that's the case. And then we give them the ability to, if it can come up 6 inches, they can do it, it can, or if it can't, that maybe they could increase some level of spacing in between the fence to allow that passage. But you could simply require that it be designed or installed to least restrict floodwaters from accessing the site.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth, did you have a comment? And then Ian, I think, had a comment.
Jeff said what I was going to say. It doesn't really matter how they end up engineering the fence as long as it's still having the ability to let water pass through. So if we condition that, they could figure it out.
Yeah, again, it just runs into the challenge of providing the screening that's satisfactory to the historic district commission. You know, if we put gaps, is that sufficient for them? So it's a challenge meeting both commissions, but I think we could figure something out.
Thank you, Melissa. Ian and then Joe.
Well, yes, Madam Chair, either this illustration is accurate or it isn't. It says proposed new installation, and it shows, vertical slatted fence. Is that accurate? And if it's not, then I think, they should present us with an accurate drawing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Joe?
Through the chair to Melissa, So you are granted 4 to 6 inches below the bottom of a fence. So if it's a batten fence that they're looking like panels,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what the HCC wants. I think what you have is kind of commercial looking. I think they'd want something a little bit more refined. And to your point, they're only going to allow 5 feet and then need the lattice up above. So I can't even imagine they're going to go much higher. So
Right.
It's really kind of minor details. So, but I think in this purpose, I'm fine going forward. And if she wants to come back with a clarification on what type of fencing, but I think to keep this moving, I'm fine with what's going on right now.
Thank you, Joe. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Look to the public. Looks like no public comment at this point. So I know there's some questions about the fence. Other than that, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close this one?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Melissa, would you like to close?
Yes, I think that's fine.
Okay, and this would essentially be with us conditioning the fence just to meet our standards.
Yeah.
So is there a motion, Joe?
Motion.
Was that
Second.
seconded by Mark?
Seconded.
Okay, so by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
And that moves us on to amended order of conditions, and we have Gisela G. Leinhard at 11 Jonathan Way, and this is represented by Jeff Blackwell and Stephen Cohen.
Good evening. We have prepared a more detailed and a site plan for purchaser of the property. You probably remember this project from just toward December.
Jeff, you're breaking up.
That was printed. Oh, 1 second. No, that's stinks. Let me know if this is any better. I apologize.
No, that seems better.
Okay, I'll just sit a little closer. This project was permitted with waivers, with a house that utilized a.
So, Jeff, we're losing you again.
Jeff, you may have to exit out and then re-log in.
Okay, let me try that. I'm going to turn my video off while I fumble.
Anyone else want to take over for him in the interim? Stephen?
Stephen is on, right? Could he?
That's back now.
All right, I think Jeff's coming back on. He just switching devices.
Okay.
I just admitted him back in.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
And I don't know that you need to see me, but I can see you. Let's see, apologies there. My iPad is not happy these days, so I've gone to my phone. So I don't know how much of my previous presentation that you heard. This is a proposed amendment to a project that was just approved toward the end of last year. The representation of the house, the driveway, and so forth was just very generic. And it was for a 3-bedroom house with a composting toilet system. The proposed plan that you're looking at now splits that house into a primary and secondary dwelling. The number of bedrooms will still be limited to just 3, and each of the structures will contain a composting toilet system. So no additional flows are being directed to the house, to the leach field, and all other benefits of the composting system will be maintained. The driveway configuration is changed, and there's also a footpath proposed to the eastern end of the property that skirts past the 25-foot setback to the isolated wetland that takes up the majority of the property. A small shed-like structure and a little patio is proposed at the very eastern portion of the property, and that is, everything there is more than 50 feet away from the wetlands. We've maintained the required and exceeded the required preservation of more than 50% of the zone between the 25 and 50-foot setbacks. Another of the waivers beside this septic leach field that was granted, another waiver that was granted was from the groundwater offset for the, at that time, single structure. We will not expand that waiver. The total number of square feet of crawl space between the 2 structures will not exceed the original 1,368 square feet. The remainder of the structures will be supported by piles or helical piles, which so that there's no expansion of the community waivers that have been granted previously. There is a shallow plunge pool proposed between the structures, and the bottom of that, the construction of that plunge pool will be more than 2 feet above the groundwater level of elevation 5.1. So those are sort of the major highlights of the changes that are being proposed under this amendment application. I'll stop, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions from commissioners? Mark?
What's on the ground now, Jeff?
This is a vacant piece of property that's been in the same family ownership since around 1972 or 3.
So, Jeff, if I'm correct, it sounds like this is changing ownership.
The property is for sale, yes, and there is a Barry Eng, whose name is noted on the plan, is a prospective buyer of the property. It is a property where you need to find the right buyer because
I think we lost you.
there's not a general acceptance of composting of general. Oh, you lost me?
Well, now you're kind of back.
Okay. I may have to move closer to the server or the Wi-Fi, but let me know if I need to move. This is not a property for the normal, everyday, sort of Nantucket sort of buyer. It is a property that takes a certain person that has a comfort level with composting toilets, and I'm happy to say that Barry is someone who's done his research and is sensitive to the constraints of the site. So we have tried in this amendment to not expand, of course, any scope of waivers that have been granted previously, and to maintain all of the performance standards for the property.
Thank you, Jeff. Because I know this project took so long for us to permit, and I feel like it barely got permitted. You know, it was a very small, kind of unassuming structure that we permitted, and I guess I'm concerned to see, you know, this trail now skirting the 25 foot of the wetland, and I know that you guys are allowed to do that, but I'd like to know, like, how are you guys actually going to construct a structure and a patio on the other side of that wetland? Because most companies on Nantucket wouldn't be able to uphold our regulations and do that. So I guess, you know, I'm not very happy with this proposal, as you can probably tell. But they barely got those waivers the first time around. So I'm upset to see more structure and construction on this site.
Actually, this is Stephen. Maybe I'll take that question for Jeff because I represent the prospective buyer, if that's okay. So I do want to say that the plan that was approved was essentially a placeholder plan by the current owner so that they could market the property. So it's not a bait and switch in the sense that my client didn't even have the property, wasn't even looking at the property at the time that plan was considered. So, you know, these are sort of the real designs of a prospective buyer. I 100% appreciate your concern about getting materials and doing construction in that area, given the narrowness of the access point. And I think it would be entirely appropriate for the commission to put a requirement in the approval in the order of conditions that limited the use of mechanical vehicles or whatever to access that point. In other words, if stuff had to be done by hand and stuff had to be brought in by wheelbarrow or whatever, you know, that is entirely appropriate condition. I think your concern is one that can be addressed with that kind of a condition.
Great. And Steve, I appreciate that. When this came before us, it wasn't like they're trying to sell the property. It was Miss Leinhardt wants to come here and she's had this since the 70s and there's no house. So, you know, it was sold to us a little differently the first time around. But I'm only one commissioner. So, you know, if other commissioners don't feel this way, then that's the way that it goes. Ian?
No, you're absolutely right, actually. That's the way I remember it. And we talked everything to groundwater flow, and we were very cautious. And I felt that we were giving the applicant the benefit of the doubt and allowing for the original 1,300 square foot property. And so this is an expansion. I take into account that, you know, Steve feels it's not a bait and switch, but and the septic requirements remain the same, but it makes me, it's, I think it's very unfortunate that they've decided on this approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe and then Seth.
Yeah, I feel like the same thing. I felt like the woman was going to move here and all those other things. I feel like they're, no offense to Joe or Steve, but I feel like the applicant is taking a step forward, trying to push back a little bit. And I feel that we were very specific, and, RJ Turcott and group were, very helpful in guiding us and giving guidance on what to watch out for. And I think we were very careful with this application, and I really don't want to see anything more than what was permitted originally. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would say I'm also concerned about this project. I think the increase in structural footprint in what's been identified by everybody, the representatives, commissioners, and members of the public as a sensitive area is not a good way to go. I don't necessarily have I sort of also have an issue with the two structures in that you'll need now two composting systems. I'm sure that they both can be cleaned and maintained as designed, but it is more onus to make sure that both systems are functioning as they are required to, rather than one. And I think that as long as you can do that and we condition that well, it's okay. But the increase in footprint is something I don't really see as being beneficial in this project. If I understand the possible want to have two structures instead of one, but I'd like to see those occupy the same square footage that was originally presented with the one structure. And then I think definitely the comments you made, Ashley, about the shed and area on the easterly edge of this property, there is a very small gap between the wetland resource area and the property line, or sorry, the 25-foot setback and the property line. And I think that will have to be conditioned extremely restrictively to make sure that there's no impacts when trying to construct anything out on the eastern side of that property.
Thank you, Seth. Mark?
Is the other permit still in effect, or is that run out?
It should still be in effect.
Yeah, just to answer that definitively for you, Mark, this is an amended order of conditions request. So that original application was issued in late October of 2019. So they're just finishing up year one of that permit. So they would have 2 more years of that active permit.
Any other questions or thoughts from commissioners? Maureen and then Seth.
Excuse me. It's a significant increase in the square footage, while it's not an increase in the total number of bedrooms. So I guess there's 2 in the larger one and 1 in the other. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
correct. That's correct.
Yep. And
sorry, who was just commenting from BPC? Because we need your name for minutes.
Joe Paul. Sorry, just thought I'd answer the bedroom question.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Joe. So that is definitely a concern of mine. And then I'm trying to divorce that from if this had been the first thing, if we hadn't seen the other plan and we hadn't heard the other story, and looking at this, we have it's something that Ian tends to call the shoehorn effect or impact, that we've now, instead of one building, we've got two. And it is, you know, whether you like it or it's the additional ground cover is definitely a concern for me. And, you know, and the, you know, and then the pool, I mean, it just, there's a lot going on in a very small space. And even if we condition the building as Ashley wisely asked, I'm still concerned about the impact of all of this on this very small available plot of land. So I am not comfortable with the additional ground cover, you know, the additional footprint on the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think definitely we'll need to see protocols for how the applicant intends to access the eastern side of the property for the proposed patio and proposed structure. And also maybe some, we might need to see some data run on the increase in the structure, what additional runoff effect that might be having. So there's still some things left to the unknown in this project that I think we need clarified before we can move forward.
Thank you, Seth. Any other thoughts from the commissioners? Looks like no, Steve.
So I do want to say, and I appreciate Seth's thought about the stormwater runoff, and we can certainly address that when we come back. But the ground cover that is increased here, while may not be desirable or appreciated by the commissioners, it's actually all outside of the 50. And generally, when people come in and apply for structures outside of the 50, that's not something that the commission traditionally rejects. I think we just need to keep in mind here that the waivers are based on the septic system, and that the 3-bedroom composting toilet system is in place here, and that, you know, how the ground cover is used up or not used up, you know, it's a relatively modest proposal for an 1.5 acre lot, considering what's usually built on these kind of lots. And I think that having the 3-bedroom septic system is really the waivers that were sought, and what house uses those or not is, you know, generally not something that the commission gets deeply involved in. So I'd just like to focus us a little bit on what waivers are being asked for, and it's not necessarily designing the house, but we can certainly look at reducing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that, because one of the waivers we granted was for separation to groundwater, and we had extensive conversations about this project, this site, conversations to the effect of it might not be buildable, period. You know, so they were really lucky to get what they have. So I think any increase in square footage on the property is something we need to look at, considering the history here. Because I mean, we had multiple hearings about this. Seth, did you have a comment? And then Ian?
Yeah, it's similar to what you just said, Ashley. The tricky point with this property was the 2 waivers required having to act in conjunction with each other. The waiver for the 2-foot separation of the groundwater, and then the waiver for the location of the septic. And I think that while normally the commission isn't generally concerned with structures outside the 50, those 2 waiver requirements operating in conjunction have caused us to be much more of a sensitive site than in other areas.
Thank you, Seth. Ian, did you have a comment or question? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, Madam Chair. So I stand by my earlier comments. So I'm not inclined to grant this. And, but when it says an 8-foot by 32-foot spa, what does that entail if there's no request for a groundwater, waiver on the spa? I'm curious. Could you tell me, Jeff, what that is?
Oh, Jeff, you're muted.
Sorry. I use the term plunge pool. It is a shallow pool. It's, I think spa is, I would not choose to use that term on my plan again. Really, it's a plunge pool. It is shallow. It's about a 4-foot depth. And that is why that pool can maintain the required 2-foot groundwater offset because of its shallow nature. I did present the project before, and I do want to clarify, it was never represented that Dr. Leonard would ever come to this property and build a house and live in the house. In fact, I mean, I'm very careful about even offering the information that Dr. Leonard is elderly and very much unwell. And I may have mentioned that in the previous hearing, but I know that that consideration cannot be a part of your assessment of the original project or this project. The size of the house originally in the original permitting was never even discussed. And aside from the fact that there was a requirement for a crawl space to place the composting toilet, the size of the house was not discussed because it met the 50-foot setback. And the proposal before you does not require either an expansion of the existing waivers, nor does it ask, nor could it ask, an amendment cannot ask for additional waivers. So, we're happy to work with you to condition, the path and the fact that obviously the materials that will go into this small shed and the landscaping element in front of it are going to have to be hand carried with power battery operated tools, and hand carrying that modest amount of work back there can easily be completed without the need for any sort of machinery. It can all be done by hand, and that, we're happy to have that as part of the condition of the amendment. So, I mean, I hear you. This is more on the site in terms of footprint, but as I said in my opening statement, there's been no expansion to the previously granted waivers. And I know that there was a great deal of consideration, but the commission became comfortable to the degree that it was unanimous approval, and also that the information provided about the composting toilet and an acceptance of the direction of groundwater flow, which was probably the most difficult technical element of the presentation and assessment of the septic system. The commission became comfortable with the science, and as I said, it was a unanimous approval. So I just want to make those statements.
Well,
thank you, Jeff. Ian?
So, Madam Chair, I would say I wasn't comfortable. I was begrudging, especially when I felt that the groundwater flow was open to interpretation. And, but correct me if wrong, but one of the waivers was for the footings because, and you're talking about a spa that, pool that you talk about having a 4-foot depth and doesn't need a waiver. I mean, refresh my memory, Jeff, but I thought it wasn't 6 feet down to groundwater there.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yeah.
You're correct. The proposed patio that links the two buildings and surrounds the pool is shown at elevation 11. Ground natural grade there is about elevation 9. So groundwater was measured to be at elevation 5.1. So all those things work together to demonstrate that, you know, we can construct the pool with a 2-foot groundwater offset, no need for a waiver.
Seth?
If I may, for Jeff Blackwell. So what you're saying is there's going to be 2 feet of artificial material, the patio placed on top of the natural elevation, and then the pool is going to be inserted into that to maintain the groundwater separation. So if it was at 11 and it was -4, then we're at 7 instead of 5.1. But if we're at the natural elevation of 9, then we'd be getting close to that 5.
That's exactly correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do you mind if I clarify? This is Joe speaking from BPC, just a little bit about that.
Sure, Joe.
Yeah, so if the natural grade is at 9, if this was a conventional construction, foundation comes out of the ground about 1 foot and then floor framing would come up another foot. So you'd have a finished floor elevation of about 11. We've got the floor elevation at 11.5. So the relationship between finished floor elevation and grade is what I would consider to be typical. And then the patio is 6 inches down from that. And we made a conscious decision to make this a patio instead of a deck so that there wasn't a structure that was connecting the 1-bedroom dwelling and the 2-bedroom dwelling. So just to clarify that, and the way that Jeff characterized it relative to the groundwater elevation was also the basis for determining that elevation.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have anything from the public on this one?
Yes, we do. So we have some comments from RJ Turcotte of the Nantucket Land Council. And his comments are, this is a significantly different project now than it was proposed and approved last year. At what point should this be considered an entirely new project? He continues, the commission should have ample time and more details for reviewing this project in an extremely sensitive area, and that this amendment represents a nearly 28% increase in footprint square footage from what was approved in 2019. This is more than a modest increase. And that is the conclusion of his comments.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, any other final thoughts from commissioners?
Can I just?
Jeff, yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to answer one of RJ's questions on this because I think it's better that I answer it. So the question about at what point should it be considered an entirely new project, an application type. So one of the things that makes amended order of conditions requests a little bit different than like a minor modification or plan change even is an amended order essentially becomes reappealable for the objects that you're trying to amend. So you have to provide all of the public notice, the public advertising, and then the portions of the order that were included in the amendment are then subject to appeal again. So the appeal window opens up for the 10 or the 21 days, depending on where you're appealing, on the subjects of the amendment. So the purpose of the amendment is to do just what they're doing. but it's also a little bit at the commission's discretion for whether they feel that adding to the scope of work is within the, the original permit and that it meets performance standards or it can't be conditioned to deal with that. So you still are conducting your regular analysis, but they're definitely in keeping with the filing an amended order for this.
Thank you, Jeff. Ian? Oh, you're muted.
So it'd be helpful to see the original drawings, but also, I mean, the proposed patio is a fairly substantial addition, I believe, with all its incumbent problems, especially with runoff. And what are the materials for the patio?
The patio is proposed to be bluestone, dry laid with, joints that will allow infiltration of rainwater striking the surface. It'll be on a bed of sand, and so it is a dry laid construction.
It looks, so it's such a substantial square footage increase over what we originally approved. I'd like to see a comparison of both, please.
I think they can probably provide that to us. Any other thoughts or questions from commissioners?
Madam Chair, if not, I would request a continuance.
Okay, Stephen, would you like to continue for 2 weeks?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this will continue until September 3rd. All right.
Thank you.
Thank
The
you.
thought of September 3rd is sort of scary. It's here.
They're all scary, Mark. They're all scary.
September 16th is scarier to me.
Oh, yeah.
First day of school.
Hang out at my house, Ashley, if you don't want anybody to find you.
All right, so we're gonna move on in the agenda to Kristen Engel, trustee of Pocomo Point at 90 Pocomo Road, and this is represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you for the applicant, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. This is an amended order of conditions request for 90 Pocomo Road. Many of you know it as the former Gamble property, in which we have received permission to pick up and move the existing structure, which has been done, put a new septic system in, which has been done, and we're continuing on with our site work of the property. This application is for the in-kind repair and replacement of an existing set of beach stairs that has been on the property for a number of years, has not been used that much fairly recently because of the construction, but that is the extent of the amended order, is to basically repair and replace the existing beach stairs as they exist today. That's the extent of the amended request, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Give a quick check and see if the public has any comment. Which also looks like no at this point, because it's pretty straightforward. So if there are no questions, is there a motion to issue the amended order? That motion made by Joe?
Motion to issue.
Was it seconded by Seth?
Second.
So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham. Oh, you're muted.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us on to Britannia Nantucket Incorporated at 81 Squam Road, and this is represented by Paul Santos.
Again, thank you on behalf of the applicant, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. This is another amended order of conditions request. We came before the commission and received approval to add an addition to the secondary or cottage dwelling on the property, which is closer to Squam Road. Within that request, we had permission to relocate an existing septic tank to make room for the addition. We're back before you tonight to provide a more detailed plan with regard to the septic upgrade of the property. And in doing so, we've actually now, instead of just replacing that septic tank, we're actually introducing an IA component onto the subject property for that front tank. In addition, this property has a separate septic tank for the main dwelling, which is located closer to the water side. And in doing so, this amended order will also address the issue of replacing that septic tank with an IA component. So at the end of the day, the septic field does not get touched. That stays in place in the way it is now. And what we're doing is basically updating two conventional septic tanks to two IA denitrification units. And that is the extent of this order request, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Paul, were you asked to change the septic through the Board of Health, or did you guys just decide to do this?
No, when we did the work on the cottage, the number of bedrooms, the ability to add the bedroom for the cottage required an upgrade to the septic, but we were able to do that with the type of system by simply adding the denitrification units and not having to put in a new leach field. It's a pressure dosed system. So with that, you have the ability for a reduction with regard to the bedroom and a bedroom credit. So that's why we chose to do it.
Got it. Thank you. All right, we'll see if there's any questions from the public. If there are none from commissioners. Looks like no. Jeff, do we have everything we need to issue the amendment?
Yes, I believe you do.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Joe got the second. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to request for determination, and we have 7 C's AC LLC at 15 Medui Creek Road. Jeff, are you taking these?
I hadn't planned on it.
Oh,
I believe I am.
you are? Okay,
Yes. Sorry, we just
Yes,
forgot to
David.
mark your cheat sheet.
perfect. David, go ahead.
Hi, good evening again. David Haynes for the applicant, 7 Cs AC. What we have here is a request for determination to install an IA system to upgrade the existing septic system by replacing the existing 1,000-gallon septic tank with a 1,500-gallon tank and with a microfast system in it to and discharging to the existing leach field. The leach field did pass inspection, but there was a requirement that we put in an IA system. The work is in the buffer zone. The septic tank that to be replaced in place is approximately 75 feet from the wetland boundary. The wetland is inside of the tree line and down a hill, down a slope. The closest work would be the blower pipes and vents that would be right at the tree line, and that would be about 55 feet from the wetland boundary. No grades would be changed. It's all within existing lawn. The site is entirely within natural heritage habitat, mapped habitat. But the activity, because it's an existing house, existing septic system upgrade, and within an existing lawn, is all exempt from MISA review. So we have filed a request for determination. The extent of the work basically is putting another tank in the ground, replacing the existing tank with a new tank at grade, reestablishing lawn over the top of it, putting in a couple of vent pipes over to the edge of the brush, and some electrical service. Very little soil disturbance, and all areas will be restabilized with loam and seed as appropriately, or other landscaping activities. That's basically the presentation.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
Well, at the risk of appearing even more ignorant than I am, David, could you tell me what a microfast system is, or should I Google it?
Well, if Jeff is here, Jeff Blackwell is still here, he can explain it to you. Probably. It's, I don't know what it,
okay,
how it works. I think you should Google it. I mean, I know it's an IA system that's approved, and I don't understand how it works, but
I think Jeff maybe has an answer.
Yeah, I can send you some information specific to the system, but all basic IA technologies, Ian, are used different processes, whether it's aerating the gray water or running it through some sort of like microbial or other filter, but it's essentially designed to remove extra nitrogen from the gray water.
Yeah.
For what's there. But microfast is one of the older approved technologies in Massachusetts, and is pretty commonly used on island, probably only behind Septitech for what we see for IA systems. I'll send you the fact sheet on it, though. You can read it at your leisure.
Thank you, Jeff.
I have to apologize. I didn't even know what the system was when I submitted the application, and I found out after it went in. So I apologize.
Please,
Sorry.
on my behalf.
Any other questions? Jeff, does staff have a recommendation for this one?
Yeah, I think we feel good about a positive 2A, approving the resource area delineations, and a -3, allowing for the work in the buffer zone without a notice of intent.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to issue a positive 2A and a -3? Motion made by Beal. Is there a second? Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, and stay safe.
Thank you, David.
David, you too.
And that moves us on to Lauren E. Brock at 8 Ackermuck Way.
Good evening, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicants at 8 Ackermuck. What you have before you is a request for determination, basically reestablishing a wetland line that has been delineated numerous times for once for this property and several times for the surrounding properties, which are all developed. Basically, we went out, reestablished the same line, just checked to make sure that everything was consistent. This site is, there's substantial topography on the site, and the wetland is really contained down in a hole on the property. So we feel that there hasn't really been any change or any creep of the wetland upslope. So that's all you have. We're not requesting any work at this time.
Thank you, Mark. Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in this too. This is a site that we've looked at a little bit and done a little bit of history and looking at. We had some concerns, if you look at the aerial photographs, that the site may actually contain a vernal pool in the middle of the vegetated wetland here. And we've looked, I know we got some information from the owners, and every aerial photograph that we've looked at and kind of seeing the site on the ground, it looks to me like that is probably more of a kind of an inland water body inside of the bordering vegetated wetland and not a vernal pool. It looks like it holds water year round. Again, we were on site today, and I'd say that the site probably was holding towards the middle anywhere from like 2 to 2.5 feet of water in the central part that's there. It looks like it's a pretty substantial. I know that question came up about its potential for a vernal pool, but I don't, especially given the level of rain that we haven't had this summer. And even with the rain of the last week, the fact that it still is holding, 2 to 2.5 feet of water, I just tend to believe that it's probably more of a pond than it is a vernal pool. So that's something we did look at pretty extensively. I just wanted to get that on the record that we feel comfortable with the delineation as shown, and that right now it doesn't appear to be a vernal pool.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. So Jeff, what is staff's recommendation for this one?
Our recommendation is for that positive 2A, confirming the resource areas as shown on the plan of record.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to issue a positive 2A?
There is, Madam Chair.
All right, motion made by Ian. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank
I will
you.
add into that the pond had a pretty amazing population of painted turtles. They definitely had a good breeding season there. There are lots of little baby ones running around and sunning themselves. It was a really nice site to inspect.
Turtles have a way of just bringing a smile to my face, so I love it.
Especially when they're like the little small, like 1-inch ones, just hanging out like 5 to a stick.
Ashley,
What?
the future school project.
Oh, turtles are way easier than students, so
For your students.
we can't plan anything right now. But maybe. All right, so this moves us on to certificates of compliance, and we're going to start with Guy B. and Diane P. Snowden at 119R Eel Point Road, and this is represented by Paul Santos.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm here. Thank you. This is a certificate of compliance request for a set of seasonal beach stairs. It's actually located on the Snowden property, but it's within an easement that is held by Dick Bellevue, who lives across the street on Eel Point Road, and accesses it through a easement over the Snowden property. It was a set of aluminum beach stairs, seasonal. They have been used. I don't think they've been used too much this past season, but it was put in place where it was designed on the plan. Originally, we had shown a 2-tiered system, a higher aluminum stair and a lower aluminum stair. Apparently the lower stair was never really necessary. So the stairs are in place. They are used on a seasonal basis. And we're asking to have the certificate of compliance issued for the property.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Jeff, has staff been out to look at this one?
Yes, we have. And we would agree that it's in compliance, but we would also recommend that we continue ongoing conditions number 19 and 20, which requires the removal of the connecting pieces and the stairs, that they're all stored outside of the 50-foot setback.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions from commissioners? If not, is there a motion to issue the certificate with ongoing conditions 19 and 20? Joe, were you making that motion?
I am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, it's seconded by Maureen.
Yes.
All right, so by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
You too,
Uh,
Paul.
Bye, Paul.
And that moves us on to John J. Moeller at 10 Monomoy Creek Road, and this is represented by Brian Madden.
Really quickly, Madam Chair, I would recommend that you could take this with the next one as well. They're a connected project.
Oh, I know. All right, so we'll take 10 and 12 together.
That way we don't have to listen to Brian give us the same speech twice.
Thank you. So Brian Madden representing the applicants. This is the restoration work for the unauthorized vegetative cutting on the coastal bank and buffer zone down to the BVW boundary that straddled the property boundaries for 10 and 12 Monomoy Creek Road. The order was issued last January, and once the COVID restrictions were lifted, the work was able to commence, including the cleanup of all the remaining vegetated debris, removal of the invasive species, and the planting activities, which you see on the plan before you. As we approved with conservation staff before the planting commenced, sassafras was unavailable at any nurseries at the time, and it was replaced with tupelo, and everything is doing well up to this point. There's temporary irrigation in place, and you can see in those photos, or at least that second photo, that all the existing regenerating sassafras saplings have been flagged with the blue flagging, and extra care was given to protect those individuals and make sure that they weren't harmed during the planting effort. And the restoration, monitoring activities, and invasive species management is going to continue. This Japanese honeysuckle encroaching in from the sides that will continue to be maintained. And this is just the first year of monitoring, and the partial certificate of compliance request is being submitted as required under special condition number 23 of the order. I'll turn over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions from commissioners? All right. So Jeff, what does staff think about this one?
Yeah, so we went out and took a look and kind of made sure that everything was in place. All the plantings were in place. The posts were in place. And I think given the fact that the special condition 23 was specifically designed to have this step to say, you guys have the markers in, you've put the plantings in, and now you begin your monitoring phase and maintenance phase to make sure that plants are surviving, plants are being maintained. If plants need to be replaced, you guys know the rules of the road to do it. But it gave us that first set of oversight just to make sure that the work actually occurred on a timely basis. And I think at this point, we feel pretty comfortable to say that they've satisfied at least the condition of the site through special condition 23. And now, honestly, I think that a little bit of the harder work begins to maintain it and make sure that nothing happens again. And then monitoring just continues as it's supposed to. So I think we feel comfortable recommending the issuance of the partial certificates for both properties to satisfy only condition number 23.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So does somebody feel comfortable making the motion to issue partial certificates for both properties, which work with condition number 23 only? Motion made by Seth.
Second.
Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
I'm not sure what a partial approval means.
You may think that. So certificates of compliance can get issued for 3 reasons, Mark. There's a complete certification, which is the project in its entirety was completed in compliance. Partial certificates are for certain aspects of projects being completed in compliance, but the remainder of the order and anything else that wasn't specifically called out continues in full force in effect. And then the third reason is to invalidate an order of conditions for either no work being done or people just wanting to close out a permit with nothing happening. So one of the things that we've started to do in these situations for restoration work is kind of establish the baseline for work being underway and underway correctly, so we don't get to the end and find out that plantings weren't done properly up front, things were omitted, things were left out, and having them come to the commission and require these interim steps for the commission to see and sign off on. So that's why I think originally we permitted this to have a partial cert to say you satisfied your initial plantings as called out by condition 23. We're going to acknowledge that you've satisfied that, but you still have to continue with the rest of the order until its conclusion.
Thank you. I'll vote aye.
All right. Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Slightly begrudging aye under these circumstances.
all right. LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham,
Begrudgingly, I say aye.
yeah. All right, so that passes unanimously. A few commissioners begrudgingly, but it still passes.
They're called curmudgeon commissioners.
I don't know. I wish I had $1 for every time someone said begrudgingly. Fired.
Thank you, Brian. All right. So this moves us on to orders of conditions. And I guess we'll start with Nantucket Island Land Bank at 101 Myacomet Avenue.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have any thoughts on this one?
I'll move for approval.
All right.
Second.
Maureen, are you seconding? Oh, Maureen.
No, sorry. No, I was asking a question. Isn't this where we wanted to have annual photographs, or does that need to be specific? 'Cause we
Yes.
wanted to see how this was doing in.
Looked like the annual monitoring was in there.
So, and so reports, it's annual reports, and they typically, we usually or always require photographs. I just wanted to.
No, clarify. So maybe we should pull out and add photographs to that, Jeff. What do you think?
Madam
Oh,
Chair.
Jeff, you're muted.
So condition 22 reads, a report including location photographs shall be provided to the commission showing the conditions prior to work being started and at the conclusion of the growing season. So they have to provide us that report with photos.
Oh, okay. So let's see. So that the reports that we're talking about in 23 are the reports that we describe in 22. All right, thank you.
Ian, did you have a comment on that, or were you?
Jeff beat me to it, and Maureen put the dot on the I. So.
Okay. Mark, do you still want to make the motion?
Yeah, begrudgingly.
Okay. Is there a second?
Give me $1.
All right, seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg.
Well, I recuse from this.
Oh, right. Sorry, I forgot. Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
So that carries with Commissioner Engelberg recused. And that moves us on to Nantucket Conservation Foundation, Windswept Bog and Barnard Valley Road.
So this one's kind of similar. I had a couple other conditions for this one since it's a more terrestrial based project. So I have some specific requirements related to the use of the clip and trip application of rodeo in 19. They still have the same reporting requirements. Excuse me. And some Phragmites things. And then we've been adding for Phragmites projects this condition 23 that should the project area show less than 50% regrowth of native species within the first 2 years and 6 months of the permit, the applicant shall file a new notice or amendment for supplementing the area with native plantings or seedings.
Thank you, Jeff. Any thoughts or comments from commissioners?
No, I hope they're successful, and I move to approve as drafted.
Perfect. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to BSS Hummock Pond Road and Hummock Pond Holdings LLC at 287 and 289 Hummock Pond Road.
So this is the one I know I said it to you. Sorry, Joanna, to step away for a second, but just to kind of run through it quickly, this was the kind of retreat project from 289 onto 287. So we included some things that some yearly photographs of all restored areas because they were replanting the area where the house was being vacated. Our general pool conditions for the small fiberglass pool. And then I added a condition 24 that all structures exposed by erosion or found within the coastal beach shall be removed by the applicant with photos and notice of the activity provided to the commission. So as anything were to uncover, I know part of that septic tank is visible right now. And so we'll probably use a little bit of discretion for that. But my nemesis are things like electrical wires for wells and things showing up, or irrigation pipe that was there magically appearing out of the bank or showing up in the beach. I just want them to be abundantly clear that that is to be removed from both those sites as it shows up, because I don't want to have to try to play chase or deal with people later.
Jeff, do we need to add like removal within 30 days of exposure or give some sort of time frame?
Yeah, it's a good idea. So shall be removed within 21 days.
Sure.
I think it gives everyone 3 weeks. Most of that stuff's pretty straightforward to remove.
Yes. Ian, do you have a comment?
Well, actually, I think erosion is spelled in an unusual fashion in condition 24.
I did. I caught that already on mine. So sorry. I always spell check everything before we run it again, because sometimes my fingers like to add extra letters.
I rather like the way it was spelled, Jeff. Erosion.
It's the Old English, Ian. It's the Old English. It's a very Chaucer. It's the Chaucer spelling.
Surprised he didn't pick it up.
Well, if it was in Gothic print, I would have done, Joe.
Yeah, I'm sure Jeff caught this one too, but there's one minor typo in 19 as well. Instead of saying these area, it needs to say these areas.
Yes. I actually hadn't adjusted that one yet, so thank you, Seth.
All right.
I saw the red line, but I didn't see the double blue line.
Any other thoughts from commissioners? If not, is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved, Madam Chair.
That's seconded by Joe.
Yes, for my grumpy partner.
All right. right. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Ocalo Realty Trust at 12B Ocalo Lane.
This was the kind of the reissue project out there. And I pulled up the old order, and the only condition we had on it before was that all materials were to be stored outside of the 50-foot setback. So I didn't really add anything new.
Any thoughts from commissioners? Mark?
Move for approval.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, so by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Paul C. Shepherd at 41 Nonantum Avenue.
So the only unique aspect of this one, I couldn't really think of any conditions, is to kind of deal with that well situation. Is I have an additional finding 2, that the commission finds that the proposed well is outside of jurisdiction, but the connection to the house would be covered under utilities in the permit overview. So if they're running just the water line from the well to the house, that they would be covered for that activity, but anything beyond there would be different.
Thank you, Jeff. Any thoughts from commissioners, or is there a motion to approve? Maureen? All right, is that seconded by Joe?
Yep.
So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Nantucket Electrical Company at 1 Candle Street.
All right. So I think we had a couple conditions for this one, that one of them can have to add one of them I figured we were going to include, but I didn't want to be presumptuous, to add I think we'd start with a condition 19, that all plantings are to be native species, no cultivars. And then, did we want to include a condition on the fence?
Yes.
All right, so 20, I'll just try to do it on the fly, to say the fence shall be designed and installed to limit any restriction for floodwaters.
So,
Not limit.
Yeah, as to not limit. Well, I think you would say as to limit any restriction, as opposed to not limit any restriction. I think you want them to limit the restrictions.
right, but Jeff, if I may, Madam Chair, through you,
Yes.
the permit overview, there was some dispute whether it was within land subject to coastal storm flowage.
Oh no, there's zero doubt that it's in land subject to coastal storm flowage. I think that the concern was whether or not it was in the velocity zone or the AE zone, both of which are within land subject to coastal storm flowage. But if you're dealing with the building code, the requirements are different, but our requirements are still the same.
Thank you, Jeff, for pointing that out to me.
Any other thoughts or comments on this one? If not, is there a motion to approve as amended? Seth?
So moved.
Is there a second? Seconded by Beal. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Fleur,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. All right, and that moves us on to the public hearing amendment of the Town of Nantucket Conservation Commission Wetland Protection Regulations.
Sorry.
And I think the idea tonight was to be looking at some of the draft fining we had come up with.
But Madam Chair, I don't have any copy of the draft findings. Did I miss them?
Of the fines. Jeff, those got sent out a while ago, right?
Yeah, it definitely did. It may be easier, especially given the time of the night, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
We're still waiting. I spoke with George about this, and apparently the concept that we've put forward is, well, not a new concept, one that they haven't encountered much for conservation commissions before. So they're doing a little bit more of a detailed review than we originally had thought on this. So they haven't completed their analysis of it. But I know we've discussed it briefly before. If people had thoughts on it specific or concerns, I know Seth sent in an additional concern to it, to get that on record, and then we'll probably end up continuing this public hearing and wait for George's, and I can make sure that it gets redistributed to everybody as well.
Thank you.
Especially since it's 8:20 at night.
Yes.
So.
And
Yes, Ian?
and so thank you, Jeff. But that also leads us on to the actual changes to our regulations. And I sent in some ideas over a month ago. I don't know who else has sent in ideas. And how are we progressing on that, Jeff?
So, all right, just to kind of update, and this is something that Ashley and I talked about, is I think the performance standard review and the update, Ian, is probably going to take us a little bit longer than dealing with violations in the short term. And I think our hopes were to get a new enforcement structure in place to help out with that, and then having a separate public hearing to go through performance standards, definitions, and procedures, because we've received information from you, we've received information from Seth. Joanne and I have compiled a little bit of information through MACC and just some additional research as it relates to some procedural things and filing fees and kind of working through some of that. But the way these hearings work are there's advertising for the hearing, you hold the hearing, and once something is voted in, it has to have an effective date that you have to advertise for at least 3 weeks prior to it becoming effective. So I think our concern where we can tend to get bogged down in performance standards and updating those was to get better than a $50 fine in place for the rest of it first, and then dealing with the other things over a little longer time period than the short term. Hopefully I encapsulated that okay for everybody. And if Ashley has a different recollection of our discussion, I think she could throw in, but that's how I kind of remember that discussion.
No, that's basically what I remember as well, because Jeff had already drafted the draft for the fining, and that was sent out in the middle of June, maybe to me at some point in June. We thought that we could move on this more quickly, and then my goal for the rest of the regs was to hopefully be starting that up, maybe in October sort of time frame, just how time seems to move, but that hopefully we get the fining done sooner, because now we've had numerous cases come up where we really don't have the proper fining structure in place. So
Would it be I'm sorry, go ahead, Seth.
Seth, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, just two really quick things related to the fine structure. Just so the other commissioners know, my comment to Jeff and Joe was related to violations related to unpermitted tree removal using a basal area calculation to basically assess steeper penalties for mature tree cutting. And you'll see what that calculation is when it gets added, but it basically increases the penalty for larger trees as they get bigger in DBH. And then related to the overall regulatory update, I'm obviously excited to do that as well. And I did send comments in, but I really think we need to get these fines updated as soon as town council has a response to that. So I think that should be the priority for now.
So I just quickly sent that original draft back around to everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.
And just real quickly too, we won't include it in the final document of it as long as council doesn't alter it too much. Excuse me. Is I did do an example, a really rough example from 36 Pocomo, for those who don't remember, on what that would estimate to be. So I'll let people read that on their own. And then I also will make sure that this gets posted up into the pack for the September 3rd meeting, hopefully with comments from council attached.
Thank you, Jeff. Joe?
Jeff, I got the draft, but what would be great is, I guess, getting, when Seth's comments came in or someone's comments came in, just to kind of share that around, just so we can all.
Sure. No, I'll send that around. I meant to send them around after I separated them apart, so people would just get the stuff relevant to this, and then we'll send around the stuff relevant to performance standard separate. So
yeah.
But yeah, no, we'll get that to everybody. Sorry about that, guys.
Sorry.
It got lost in the shuffle.
All right. So it sounds like we're going to continue this one until September 3rd, when councils hopefully finish their review. And that gives all of us a chance to look at the document again.
Yep. I'll make sure I'll send it around. I'll get everyone else's comments around too.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. All right. That moves us on to other business. Approval of minutes from August 6, 2020. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
There is, and thank you, Terry, as always.
Yes, thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal? Nope, you're muted.
Aye.
Engelborg?
Aye.
Aye. Golding?
Aye.
Give them a brief update.
LaFleur?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Topham?
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And again, yes, thank you, Terry, for great minutes as always.
Thank you, Terry.
And that moves us on to discussion of SBPF 77 through 122 Baxter Road and 65 through 67 Baxter Road. Jeff, did we get new information on this?
Yeah, just a little update, and we're kind of working through something too, and I'm trying to get something from council related to the question that's been asked about applicant responsibility against property owner responsibility to the order. I know Ian had asked for something in writing about that, and that's what we're trying to endeavor. But a little update on the sand delivery ticket adventure. So we received if you guys remember, the handwritten list of sand delivery, and we reached out to Toscana about trying to verify those, and Toscana said, well, we issued them the tickets, and then we just have our billing record, but they aren't able to really verify those tickets. And I think that's a little concerning from both ends, that we can't get that completely verified. So I think what we're hoping is to get that responsibility cleared up through council for who is responsible, or whether they're equally responsible, and then put something together, whether it's an enforcement action or something to be sent to both those parties that they're responsible for that. They're responsible for proper reporting for that. But then also make sure that we're legal in doing that with the order that doesn't necessarily require the same level of reporting as the SPPF order for the geotubes. So We were hoping to get something definitive back from the provider of the sand, and we were not able to secure that information. So we're trying to recreate a little path of action. So, but I know Ian has a question. So
Yes.
Well, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I'm sort of dumbfounded that they keep a copy of the ticket with all the details.
So apparently not. So I would have thought someone selling that product would keep a record that was more definitive than that, but apparently they do not. So
what do their accountants say about, you know?
I don't know. So we're not necessarily able to, beyond the delivery amount that we were provided, not able to necessarily verify that completely through the vendor. So
So it could be fictitious.
well, that's what we're trying to still resolve, because we don't really have an effective way to resolve that without the person who provided that material having really clear records that happened. So,
Madam Chair, may I?
Yeah.
So SVPF we've looked through reams and reams of printouts.
yes.
So are they claiming that they have a double system where the reams and reams of printouts for SPPF?
No, this is
No.
from the Netco portion.
Netco.
This is
I
Netco.
understand, but surely they use the same system for Netco as they do for SBPF.
But if they haven't been keeping them, like it's not part of their permit to keep the delivery tickets, so they threw them away or whatever, and now there's no record anywhere is what the problem is. They had different conditions on their permit.
They also use different sources as
There's
well.
different sources. Holgate's partner
Yeah.
and Miles Rees.
Ah,
Yeah.
And
and
Netco went to Toscana.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
ah, yes.
I was more surprised that no one seemingly has records of inventory that they've sold and not necessarily no.
Yeah,
I was-
sometimes you don't want to have the record there, and I think that's what's concerning.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this seems also, I mean, there are responsibilities if you hire somebody, you know, to do something for you that is under a, you know, and where you're under responsibilities to report it and they aren't giving you the data that, you know, someone you've hired isn't doing their job. You know, the buck doesn't just stop with, you know, Toscana or whoever it might be. I mean, there should be some kind of responsibility being held by, you know, by SPPF or the owner or some, you know, I mean, this is just completely bizarre. I mean, it's not good business practice, let alone good practice when it's a hugely controversial issue.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes, Ian.
so hypothetically speaking, let's say that there was one group providing sand that was well known to have a negative attitude towards towards a regulatory body, because I'm speaking hypothetically, of course. Would the town council be able to subpoena their records?
So that's kind of what we're looking into, because the bigger question came up when we had the discussion at the commission on who is ultimately responsible for compliance with the permit and record keeping and what's going on. And I don't want to rehash that discussion, but I think the two parties involved with that permit had a very differing of opinions on who was responsible. And we just want to clarify from council that they're either both equally responsible. One is more responsible, one is less responsible. But my gut feeling is that that's going to come back as they are equally responsible for the conditions of that permit. So with that, we'll have better standing to then issue out something definitive to make sure that this situation doesn't happen again.
Jeff, I have kind of a follow-up. I know when this came in front of us and we had Netco in front of us like months ago now, Mr. Lager, I think his name was, he was requesting that they needed to do more work out there. I just want to make sure that they still have like a cease and that they're not trying to do any work out there currently.
Correct. We have not released them to do that work.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this one before we move on? Town council certainly has a big list from us.
They have a big list all over from the town for like their entire staff. So I'm single-handedly keeping George and John Giorgio busy, but there are a few other ones that are busy for the town too. So they're earning their money from us right now.
All right, so this will continue, I guess, for 2 weeks, hoping that we have more information. And that moves us on to reports. So we'll start with Ian and Crack.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. CPC?
So we had our annual Zoom meeting, and it was kind of cool where Channel 18 got involved, and who was it? Sarah Boyce of Linda Loring Foundation, Janice Cesario of Outreach Program, Nantucket Interfaith, and Neville Richards did something on the American Legion. And it was a presentation on how the money given from the CPC has helped their programs and how it helped, and et cetera, et cetera. It was very well done, very professional. I was very impressed. So I would recommend everyone go on the YouTube channel for the town, find this out. It was really well done. And even the chair for the CPC, I'm space his name right now, I can see him, Ken Bovegran, did a great job. It was really good. It was a really nice way to make a presentation. They just did a fantastic job. I really applaud Channel 18 for stepping up and doing such a great job and really putting Nantucket in a really good light. So was pretty much it. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. That is one nice thing about everything being virtual is that all the meetings are recorded in a different format and we can all watch them more easily.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. All right, NP and EDC?
We finally have our meeting on Monday. And I would look forward to a presentation like Joe was just describing, but I fear that may not be the case.
Well, we'll hope for you.
Thank you.
Mark, has your Pulpus Harbor committee started up yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, then that will move us on to commissioners' comments. Any commissioners' comments?
Bunch of curmudgeons around here.
I know, we're tired here at 8:37. If there's no commissioner comments, I'll hand it over to Jeff for administrator staff reports.
Yeah, just really quickly, Joanne, because she's awesome, got Seth's and Ian's comments sent around to everybody already on the regulations. So check those out. Hopefully everyone gets those. If anyone has any other ones or any other thoughts or ideas, send them in to both Joanne and I, and we'll try to flip them back to everybody as quickly as we can. So other than that, thank you guys for hanging out till 20 till 9.
You will. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Don't all raise your hands at once, right?
No, we'll give it to Ian.
This is the first thing he's done tonight, not begrudgingly.
Is there a second?
Second.
By Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye, and good night.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye. Good night, everyone.
Good night. This meeting is adjourned.
Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Have a great couple weeks. See ya.
Thank you.